Craig Makhosi. I've already had quite a few inspiring men on the show, such as my Indian American Tantra teacher, Whitney Wheelock, my 77-year-old psychedelic therapist and techno icon, Rob Bennett, and
cool.
our mutual friend, multi-entrepreneur, multi-millionaire, and my mentor, Rob Paddock, who you used to deliver vegetables with, I heard some 20, 30 years ago.
Indeed. Organic vegetables.
Organic vegetables, just to make sure. And all of them embody a, I would say, unique masculinity. Like they're, for me, very inspirational men in their own way. But none of them have spent as much time as you actively involved in the men's workspace. I think it's been about roughly, 2 decades?
So, 2006 I was initiated.
Yeah, so I figured if there's one guy to ask, it would be you. And that question would be, what makes a man?
I mean, I would just point you to all my elders and many way more qualified men than me to answer that question. So I can only say to you that in some ways I'm still trying to figure it out. And I think each of us, that's maybe is our task. It's probably part of that greater individuation question, who are we actually? And is being a man anything specific ultimately to who we are? And I think that's probably quite a relevant question at this time with all this gender sort of politics and all the stereotypes being questioned. So I think for me, it's an ongoing process. I can give you a bunch of the things that I suppose contribute to how I see myself as a man. But I don't have any certainty around what the answer is to that question. Like there's a biological answer. And I think that those biological qualities of being a man definitely, or like having a male body, definitely creates a particular experience for most of us that we have to manage and deal with. So, and then of course that responsibility, and I mean now we're talking about, sexual gender, tends to bring with it power and responsibility that has repercussions for community and for culture, ultimately, and for society at large. And, I'm specifically referring to fatherhood, I suppose, and we're seeing how huge an impact that has on each of us individually in terms of how our psychologies, grow and mature, and then also how it's impacting society at large. But it's not just that either, is it, So it's so much more. So being a man,
Then let's dive into your personal story. How did you become a man?
Become a man. I think probably the biggest piece is around some sense of being acknowledged by elders, some sense of being seen by my elders and acknowledged in that way. And even though it's happened very officially, let's call it through the Mankind Project, where there was an initiation and there was this acknowledgement of being a warrior, at least, that was the terminology that's used on those weekends. Of course, there's other archetypes as well. But so that was an acknowledgement. But, in some ways, I still question whether I have fulfilled my own definition of being a man. And this is a topic we've spoken about offline. So, for instance, for me, again, although it's not the whole thing, but fatherhood is a big piece. And I'm still not a father. And so it's a question that goes through my mind, like at what point, what if I never am a father? When do I really, it's almost like the next initiation in a way. But in terms of becoming a man-ish, I don't know, Yannick. Honestly, it's such it's a question that opens a lot of contemplation for me. But again,
why we're here.
That's why we're here. So I think there's also something in the question for me around like maturity or around responsibility, around having values, taking accountability. What values?
Values, yeah.
I think integrity is an obvious one, which is trying our best to align what we say we are going to do with what we actually do. And integrity is a tricky one because we are breaking agreements all the time. So again, like, does a man keep his agreements? Yes. Do I keep all my agreements? No. Am I a man? Ish. But then we have these processes which we like to call accountability, which is where you take account for when you haven't quite managed to live up to the agreements you've made. And so you take account for those impacts of the choices we've made, whether we intended them or not. So this is very like Mankind-esque in terms of how we teach accountability. So I think that's a big piece for me. A man will take responsibility for the consequences of his actions, whether he intended them or not. And again, responsibility, that's a big word. Maybe it's about at least acknowledging that there's an impact. And then for me, there's a big piece around, safety. Are we safe for the community? Ultimately, men tend to play the role of protector, especially if women are in the vulnerable space of being pregnant, for instance, which they're very capable of being incredible warriors, even when pregnant. But
I love this line.
so theoretically, that is something that we should always be prepared to be as protectors. I think the provider role is also something that's become a stereotype. I think men and women can both provide pretty equally,
Sure.
even in ancient days, But I think protector is something that's important. And protection, not just physically, maybe it's around protecting the values of the community. But again, for me, that's also equally the role of women and the matriarchs and the wise ones, the elders, So I don't know, maybe we're just meant to be fathers. Maybe that's what maybe that's the role of men,
Yeah, you mentioned some very interesting themes I was already planning on touching on with you. I would like to share something with you about integrity, which for me is one of my highest values, and also one of the values I experience the most conflict around. And integrity, I interpret it is sticking to my word, right? And I had one of my mentors, female mentors in the past, sensitized me for questioning that approach. I remember that was 4 or 5 years ago when she was also my business partner. Because, you could say there's some form of external integrity and internal integrity. And I'll give you a specific example of a podcast guest who was supposed to come on to the show on Wednesday. He's a Christian preacher, I think we can say. And he's been preaching quite conservative Christian traditional values such as integrity, right? And then on Wednesday morning, 1 hour before our date, he was literally standing in front of the door, and I was on the way here. He called me and sounded super anxious and said he was feeling an unease in his spirit. Hence, he canceled the podcast, right? And we still met up in the Newlands forest, went for a walk just because I was already on the way and still wanted to check in on him. And we had exactly that chat about what's integrity. Would he have stick to integrity if he had done the podcast nonetheless, or did he stick to his integrity by listening to himself, to his body, to his spirit, canceling the podcast because of that. So what is integrity?
So the way I would interpret it is that you have sort of hierarchies of agreement, I suppose. Maybe he has an agreement to honor God's voice as it speaks to him, for instance, if he's a preacher. And if God's voice says, actually don't do the podcast, then that's who he needs to listen to, And then for me, the piece where he stays in integrity is if he takes account. So he's here and he tells you, and I have to change. Because agreements do change, that we can't keep our word always. Sometimes we make an agreement based on a certain piece of knowledge and maybe something we didn't know, and then we find something else out, so we change our mind, and we realign with our values. So I think there's, for me, it's the fact that he didn't just not show up. He didn't leave you hanging. And then later you're like, what happened? You're like, sorry, no, God told me not to do it, or it felt uneasy or something. But it's a tricky one. At the end of the day, we're not meant to judge each other. We judge ourselves, and we all do a pretty good job of doing that. So ultimately, it's he will know whether he was doing it because his integrity said, actually, this is not for you, or whether he was scared, or, it is scary, being put up by hours. I had my own little nervousness, and especially after listening to Rob's podcast, And just all my own criticisms of myself come up, all the own ways in which I measure myself. I'm like, geez, now Yannick's got me after Rob, it's like hard act to follow, So anyways,
I mean, I get anxious every time I come in here. And then when I review the podcast, I'm like, oh, I fucked that up. And oh, it's so bad. And oh, dude, it's so apparent that English is not your native language. And oh, dude, same shit story all over again.
I'm just continually impressed with your English when I listen on the podcast. So don't take it easy. Yeah,
appreciate it.
Try this in German and we'd have a problem.
You mentioned Mankind Project, which is a globally operating organization dedicated to man's work. I'd say, like very generally speaking, just to give the listeners some form of context. I actually did that initiation, that New Warriors training, it's called, a few weeks ago. And yeah, you've been actively involved in there for 2 decades. What if, like, for those who have never heard of Mankind Project before, to give them some deeper insights, why do you do what you do, and what do you do there?
Okay, so again, I'm not necessarily an official spokesperson for MKP, which it's affectionately known by Mankind Project. It started around 1980. I can't remember if it was 79 or 81 or something like that, but it was 3 men in the United States who were responding to the kind of call from the feminist movement that like men needed to transform. And these 3 men were quite aware, and it's glaringly obvious, and you and me are very aware of it now, which is that white men specifically in the Western culture were so removed from our ancestors, so removed from our cultural lineages, that most of us have no form of rites of passage. That is how the elders transfer the wisdom and the knowledge, and also the acknowledgement of young men becoming men. So there's a big piece around rites of passage, which is around being seen by our elders, by men we respect, and being shown like, this is what we expect from you to join us. We believe in you, but you need to also demonstrate it for yourself, and then being acknowledged and blessed into that like welcome type of thing. So, and of course the men have to go through some kind of an ordeal, the classic hero's journey, with a descent, where the status quo is left behind, and then they go through the ordeal, some sort of a challenge, and then there's a victory or an overcoming of the challenge. And the man goes through a transformation in the process. So what they decided to do was to create a rite of passage that would allow men who had never received such an initiation into a new way of being a man, so to speak. So they came up with the New Warrior Training Adventure, which is what you did a few weeks ago, the NWTA. So the New Warrior Training Adventure, it's a training adventure. It's not called an initiation. It's not called a rite of passage. But of course, it overlaps with those concepts in our various cultures. So yeah, I mean, we all join as initiates like you. Once you've done the weekend training, if you join the 12-week integration cycle where you learn how to hold men's work circles, how you hold or help hold each other to account, or yourself to account, how you look at ways that you project onto other people, and you become more fluent around the different emotional aspects of being a man and the different archetypes, and other processes as well. So once you've gone through that 12-week process, you can then join a weekend as a staff man, which is also a volunteer. In fact, you pay even as a staff man just to cover all the costs that go into running it. So it's quite an incredible organization. It's a lot of men just giving a lot of their love, a lot of their time, energy, their money, etc. And just to continue this process of giving men a chance to go through some kind of a rite of passage, where there's always more staff men than initiates. For example, I think there were 45 of you initiating. There were about 60 of us staff men on site.
That's wild.
So
I've never seen such a
it's incredible.
ratio.
It's incredible. It just creates such an energy. And of course, we as staff men, it's not like it ends with the initiation. Like we continuing in our path of growth and doing our work and are for the rest of our lives. So we come back to staff for ourselves. That's why we're willing to pay, because we're getting stuff too. We're continuing to grow, continuing to mature. So yeah, for me, I spent quite a few years just as quite a young man in the project. Back then, it was definitely mainly older men. I felt noticeably younger, whereas now I think you're around my age when I went through, and there's a lot more men of varying ages, which is awesome. And yeah, I was active for a good 5, 6, 7 years. Then I dropped out for almost 10 years, maybe 8 or 9 years. And then I came back the last 3 or 4 and joined the leader track, which is like a nice process of maturing as a leader, learning how to run the weekend in a safe way. Yeah, it's a beautiful process.
What did you drop
out? But I have many elders. There were a couple of reasons. The one is that from 27 to 34 or 33, I was very, very involved in MKP. As a volunteer, I was on the council. My passion's always been diversity work, like because I teach Xhosa and I've lived in villages and all sorts of places. I care a lot about healing that wound of inequality and the kind of unconscious superiority complexes that are sort of all over the show in our culture, which of course means that a lot of people are made to feel less than and inferior. And so I see a lot of these dynamics that a lot of other white men aren't always aware of. I think it's much better today, but at that point in time, I often felt like the one voice, and which of course wasn't true, but it's how it felt. Certainly there was a lot of resistance, but there was also a lot of support for what I brought. A lot of that was language learning, like, hey, let's learn Xhosa, let's learn Zulu, let's learn languages so that we can meet people halfway. Let's understand cultural practices rather than writing them off as barbaric when often they're far more civilized than the things our culture does and far more conscious.
Give a few examples.
Well, I mean, I remember a politician killed a cow in his garden in the 90s, and it was just like headline news, and all the white people in the neighborhood were like absolutely outraged by this barbaric act of black people killing cows in a garden, And I'm like, the cows, the way they slaughter a cow for ritual sacrifice in Xhosa is filled with reverence. I mean, they love their cows. Like they live beautiful lives, and there's huge processes of honoring. And I've seen magical things happen at ceremonies where cows often are given a chance to like select themselves, or the ancestors select the cow. It's phenomenal. It's like things you can't really quite explain. But, this was a neighborhood of people just at like in the early New South Africa. And this particular politician was, like a well-respected ANC politician who'd fought for the struggle. Theoretically he's a hero, as part of the liberation of South Africa, being treated like some kind of backward, uncivilized barbarian. That was the vibe. And meanwhile, our culture slaughters so many cattle without any reverence, without any gratitude, without any real care for the way they live, the way they raise, what we feed them. I mean, when you look at the conditions, it's enough to make people go vegan, which many do. Certainly I went vegan for quite a few years in my early 20s. And yeah, it's way more barbaric for me. And, I admire the honesty of a culture that says like, yes, we do slaughter animals for sacrifice and we revere them and we're deeply grateful and it means a lot to us and we use it for community healing and. Look, that's a bigger topic, whether we go there or not. I've been involved in the culture for a while and it's not my favorite thing or necessarily something I want for me. But I learned as a vegan or as a very strong vegetarian at the time when I lived with the sangomas, the healers in the Eastern Cape, I learned to revere and respect like how much it meant to have an animal give its life, for us to be able to eat and to feast and to celebrate and to bring people together and to mark something special, which was an initiation. So again, we might go there because we're like jumping the topic, but yeah, we'll go there if we need to. But so with MKP, the question was, why did I leave? I left because I got two reasons. The one is I got tired of pushing an agenda that I felt had a lot of resistance, and like older white men were pushing back and kind of bullying me a bit. That's how it felt, and others weren't protecting me in a way that I thought was
because you were standing up for
because I was
minority,
for the black voice, or for like issues that I thought were because I think the issue that a lot of white people in South Africa have is that they want to judge circumstances as if there was no past, so they're like, everything should be fair and equal. And it's like, well, hang on, like you're missing the context of the situation. It's like you can't just make a judgment and dismiss people without being really, really aware of the dynamics. A lot of the time, most people are not aware of. So there is, I want to call it ignorance. And, the question of whether it's willful ignorance or not is difficult to know. But for me, I feel like we really should make an effort to be aware of people's circumstances, given how much generosity of spirit I think, black South Africans have shown to us since the new South Africa. So for me, it's a very, very deep part of how I identify as a South African and what I care about. And hence why teaching the language is a big piece for me, because for me, it's just the obvious and most kind of crucial starting point in a way to level certain fields of awareness. But and I got fed up, and also I was 34, and at that point, my income earning was through language teaching, and it's not a like business you go in to make money, especially not teaching Xhosa in South Africa. It's like it was a business where I could just make enough money to justify that I was doing that instead of all the other things I could have done with my education. So, but I did it for the passion, and now I was spending half my time as a volunteer in a men's work organization, not making money and getting grilled at times for speaking up on things that mattered to me. So it just became a thing of like, whoa, I don't have a house, I don't have a family, I'm like 34, I'm feeling behind from a lot of my peers. I'm already struggling with my business as it is. Now I'm doing men's work and feeling like these men are not listening. And at the time I was like, oh, it's an ageist thing. And I think partly it might have been an ageist thing. Like older men don't like being told what to do by younger men. And also it was an immaturity thing. I wasn't that mature. I think I hadn't developed the skills of being influencing rather than kind of trying to, hey, you guys are, bad or wrong, or like this should be like this, because I also don't know the situation for older white men. And over time, I began to see it more clearly. And in fact, living with the Sangomas and learning about ancestors really got me in touch with my white ancestors, my recent ancestors, and really gained a lot of empathy for what Europeans have been through. So I'm actually from a place, at this time where I'm really like, have as much empathy for white people, if not more, In fact, I sometimes feel way more sorry for whiteys, We don't know how deep our trauma goes, And it's been an interesting journey. But so for me, there was a need to step back, and I got fed up, and I was kind of burning out. So I just said, you know what, I need to go live my life a bit. And so the rest of my 30s, I still did my men's circles. I just didn't staff. I didn't go do the weekends. And I was never intending to join the leader track. I was one of those guys like, oh, I don't know, fuck the leaders, like I'll lead my way, and I did. Like I would start all sorts of different things, but I wasn't on the leader track. So then 2023 came around, I think it was 23. And a man called Luvuyo Mabekbe, who had I'd actually been on a weekend when he initiated. And he's just a man of great gold. And he'd been hot-seated and blessed to be a full leader, the second full leader in South Africa, or the third, but the second one active at this time. And he was staffing, it was his first weekend. So that's when I heard that, I was just like, I just knew in my heart, it's like, cool, I'm going back. And I went and I staffed. And then a month later, another guy in the project said, hey, why don't you join the leader track? And I was like, okay, cool. And then I joined. And then so now the last few years have just been on the leader track. And it's been such a beautiful blessing, like the leadership, mentorship from these different men, being part of these like large circles of men that care so much. And the way, like it's just been great. It's been really good for me. It's helped me mature a lot as a man. Even though I still question all the time, am I a man? Which part of me is still a boy? It's become very, very clear to me what we were missing as teenage boys. And, I had a very loving father who cared a lot and he worked hard. And unfortunately, in the working hard, it meant that he was either just not around during the days, during the normal hours, he was around in our life. But when he also was around, there was often, he was dealing with his own stress relating to work. So was not always able to be emotionally available. He's coming from his generation as well, which was not as... I would say he was an outlier in terms of emotional maturity, actually. I remember him saying that a woman came to the law firm, like a female psychologist, she came to the law firm to do an emotional assessment of all the lawyers. and my dad and one other were like the only two who kind of scored, whatever in the realm of like honorary woman. I don't know if that was the terminology, but I just remember like, so he was in touch with his feelings and it was great, but he worked too hard. And unfortunately, I was listening to Rob on the podcast. He was talking about like in their family, they achieve. In my family, I'm like, for me, achievement.
Chill.
Well, it's more like how I relate is the most important thing to me. And I'm extremely critical because I've had like super anger outbursts since I was young, So I've had these like explosive temper, since I was a small boy. And trying to understand that because I realized I don't trust myself, or I didn't trust myself for a long time. Because how do you trust yourself when you have an explosion of anger that harms people around you and harms people's opinions of you as well? So it harms your relationships, but it's uncontrollable and you don't know where it comes from and it doesn't make sense. And you're a boy and no one ever shows you how to deal with it. It's a difficult thing to actually fully integrate. So it's been a long process for me of starting to see my anger and that fire as a gift because it's like it's energy. And so I'm still in a place with my anger where I'm still hypercritical because I can see the damage it can do, but I'm also grateful for it. But I'm not where I want to be, bro. Like just I have little outbursts, like just even if it's a little one, I'm like, I have that harsh critic and that harsh judge. And you brought it up earlier, I think, and for me it's a big theme. Is like how many men don't feel worthy. Like it's crazy, bro. And how many of us are self-critical and how our culture influences us to just constantly measure ourselves and judge ourselves and evaluate ourselves is not enough. We're just never enough. So it's a big piece of my life. And it's like a constant game of like, just like, hey,
Sure.
dude, like nurturing myself into going like, bro, you are enough, dude. But it's hard to.
Dude, there's so many nuggets to touch on. I could listen to you for hours. But I want to go deep on something you mentioned a few times now on the side. You moved in with you lived with sangomas, which from my understanding, are South African shamans.
I mean, shaman is an interesting word because that, you can get into a whole debate around what shaman means, and
very, very different.
Can we appropriate it,
places,
like in that way? So I don't like the word shaman utilized too loosely, but I suppose people who work with maybe the ancestors, the living and dead ancestors, people who work with spirit, and with the intention of healing, they're the healers. So the word for a traditional doctor in Xhosa is igqirha, and the word for a Western doctor in Xhosa is ugqirha. So it's just the prefix changed. And so those doctors were the ones who could diagnose people's health, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. Because, of course, the Xhosa and most indigenous people see health as a holistic thing, not just like, oh, your body. And, of course, now Western science is seeing it as well. The body keeps the score. It's like, oh, hang on, ancestors live on in us through our DNA, through our, cellular, memory, etc. So, yeah, the Sangoma is a more generic word. It's actually more the Zulu term, and it's linked to ingoma, which is song. And the songs carry a lot of the medicine. So for me, that's why a huge passion in my life is song and sound and using song as a medicine that brings people together and allows us to express and emote and connect and not be individuals, because that's the thing about song. You become one, you become unified through song. So for me, it's like one of the biggest passions I have. And it links so beautifully with how Black folk survived apartheid in many ways. I mean, there's a documentary called Amandla, which we can chat about at some point, but it's all about revolution in 4-part harmony. So it's how the revolution was kept alive and sustained through the use of song, and how people coped with something as grotesque as apartheid through song. And you still see it today, how many people, song is just such a beautiful part of South African culture. And it's a big part of the men's work now as well. So that's an area I'm very passionate about, is songs, And so the Sangoma, the Amagricha, that training. What was the question again?
Tell me more about
what are they?
What do they do? Your experience about living with sangomas.
Okay, well, that's another question. So look, to round it off, so they're the traditional doctors, and there's different styles in terms of different tribes. Even within the Xhosa, there's different nations, different clans. There'll be different ways of doing things, but there is a commonality. They also work with dreams, the belief that ancestors communicate as well through some dreams, and it's a beautiful culture that, unfortunately, with the oncoming of Christianity and that particular way of seeing the world, brought quite an intense schism in the culture and in the people, because those who adopted Christianity and rejected ancestors were given access to privilege and to resource, and were educated and learned English, and that over generations led to all sorts of kind of privileges, whereas those who rejected Christianity and hung to the ancestral beliefs were often kind of left behind in terms of education or technology or access to resource, etc. And of course, many keep both because they're actually very well aligned, and it's such a fascinating worldview. So for instance, Jesus, I always struggled with Christianity because I went to Christian schools and I just didn't like the personalities or the energies often of the preachers. And I found the whole thing made no sense. And there's a lot about what I was taught that just really didn't resonate. The parts that resonated were Jesus' teachings, but a lot of the other stuff was just, for me, hard to accept. But when I learned about ancestors, then I was like, oh, they just see Jesus as an ancestor. He's like a really epic ancestor who's living a particular archetype and a particular role model. And of course, he's worthy of being followed. His teachings are great, but it doesn't mean he's the only one and you have to believe in him or you're going to hell. I mean, it's the way we use language, especially in religious ways, is so divisive and so, I think, damaging, to be honest. But that's also a whole nother topic. So, in terms of my experience, I just graduated psychology and film studies at UCT 2003. I didn't even go to my graduation because I was just so kind of over society and just heartbroken, and I'd been studying Buddhism and meditation and yoga for the last year or two before that, and other Eastern esoteric and different shamanic stuff, actually.
Have you seen the movie Into the Wild?
Everyone used to say I look just like the dude, but that book was really, really hugely influential for me because I longed to do that. And then when I read that book whilst at university, it ended with that piece where he's I can't remember the line. It's something like, happiness isn't real unless it's shared.
Yeah, happiness is only real when shared.
Yeah, and for me, I was like, that made his death worth it, if that makes sense. Because even though it's tragic that he died, what he did for young men like me was he went and lived what we were fantasizing about, because we were so longing for that.
I'm the same. That's why I'm I got I just started smiling when you told about your, graduation phase, and I love the movie. And are you talking about
movie was good as well. I read the book
by John Krakauer?
Yeah.
I found
The
that
movie was also great.
But the book goes even deeper. I love what John Krakauer created.
Yeah.
But keep going.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just that character, Chris, I can't remember his name.
Christopher McCandless.
Yes, Chris McCandless. Exactly.
Alex Supertramp.
Supertramp. So yeah, what a legend. So I think he did what a lot of us long for, which is a self-initiation. It's like saying, I'm cutting ties with my mother, my father, my identity, with this giant parental system that's like protecting me through privilege and all these things that a lot of us have received, but have not really received what we needed, and going into the wilderness is one of the classic ways that young men are initiated, but it's not meant to be alone. It's meant to be your elders take you and they leave you out there for a while, but you're still guided. So he did that. Then he discovered that, relationships are what make life meaningful, which is the essence of Ubuntu, essentially. And
Ubuntu, I am because we are.
So that's a common misunderstanding in my judgment. Yeah. And it's written a lot, I am because we are. The thing is, there is no I in Ubuntu. It's literally... Because of course people like the Descartes, I think therefore I am. And then they're like, Ubuntu, I am because we are. But it's like, for me, that's not right. So Ubuntu is defined in Xhosa as ngumntu ngabanye ubuntu, ngabanye abantu, okay? Or otherwise, ngumntu ngabantu, okay? Which means a person is a person through or by means of people, okay? So for me, the way I would translate that, if I was going to make it a bit more whatever, is that we are who we are through our relations. Okay, so it's not I am because we are. There's no I. It's we are who we are through our relations, which I prefer because it's kind of like the thing that I noticed a lot in the villages, and what I could gain a sense of when I was out there was how effortlessly people sort of lent towards collective thinking. Of course, there's individuality, but that comes later. Everything is first about the good of the clan. As an example, you can order each other around in a particular way, but it's because you're all in service to each other. It's not about bossing each other, but it can just be done, as opposed to like, oh, hey, won't you please do this? And like, no, I'm a. So there's a collective consciousness. People identify by their clan name, for instance, quite often, and you can ask them who they are, and they'll say their clan name, not their individual name. That's almost the least important. Yeah, there's a lot in Ubuntu which is about relationship. I think that's the ultimate piece, and it's about honoring all our relations, which is the common thing. Even Native America, aho mitako yasin. It's like all my relations. That's where we get all our meaning in life from, and that's where we can draw all our gratitude from. I mean, when I'm wanting to do a gratitude practice, I just start with all the things I have a relationship to, and then it's like, oh my God, I'm so wealthy. I have so much wealth. I'm like blessed beyond capacity. How can I then choose to focus on a few things that I don't have relation to or am wanting? It's just like, it's a waste. But it's easy to do, I still have the things I want. But okay, we're jumping, which is fine. So McCandless, yes, that into the wild. I had a calling to leave society, but at the same time, I was very aware of the gap between Xhosa or Black people and where I was living. So we'd always had Xhosa domestic workers, like I'd call them my Xhosa mamas, throughout my life, who often lived with us at home, and who I had these beautiful relationships with. But I'd never been to their houses. Most of them I'd never met their families. They came to us. I didn't know if they did go back to the township or to the Eastern Cape, wherever. I didn't know where that was. It wasn't part of our awareness. So I was becoming quite uncomfortable with that gap.
Just to give some context, you grew up in the Cape Town area. That's where. Yeah, that's what you knew.
Yeah, I mean, it's a common South African thing where even in apartheid, it's like black and colored women were hired to look after white children,
Sure. It's still the case.
It's still the case. Yeah. It's cheap labor, and people are working and they're making money, and they don't have time to look after kids. It's expensive, it's time-wise and energy-wise. So yeah, we were looked after by Xhosa nannies, and certainly from what I can tell, a very consistent experience, if you speak to white people, is that the Xhosa nannies were amazing, loving, caring, kind, especially to the children, And for me, that's an incredible testament to the spirit of the people, that whilst the system was oppressing them, they would still give love to the children of the oppressors because they were children. And the spirit of motherly love was so in them that they did that. They cared for these children. And it wasn't like a cynical, I'm getting paid, I need to look after these kids. There's a clear emotional care. And it's a topic that could probably be explored, and I'd love to talk with those mamas as well. It would be very interesting as a documentary, But for me, I've always had a profound appreciation and love for my Xhosa mamas who treated me with so much love throughout my life. And arguably, are a big part of what I didn't get from my broader white family, who are all wonderful, loving people on both sides of my family, but generally lived very far away from me, if not in other countries. So they didn't give me what I believe children need. And that's based on what I've seen in villages and what I think in my mind when I think of what we had for millions of years, as Bushmen or tribes in Europe or wherever we were. You grow up surrounded by so many relations, so many people you trust. You have this field of humans that form a kind of a greater nervous system in which you can feel safe. I mean, ideally, but I believe that was the case. This is where you start to realize like the poverty of European upbringings is like how few relatives we have and how commonly there's quite traumatic, abusive dynamics in those relations. Most of us do not grow up feeling safe. Even me, I mean, there wasn't any abuse that I have any conscious awareness of, but I did not feel safe a lot of my childhood. I did not feel safe going to the schools,
Why is that? Are you talking about like the crime in the streets?
No, I'm talking about from my peers. I'm talking about like we had bullies at school. Some of the teachers were bullies at the most expensive school in Cape Town, Not all of them, but some of them were hectic, and also at the other schools I was at. I mean, it's a common thing of teachers in Britain, in Europe, in South Africa, like in the 80s, 90s. If you had a nice teacher who cared about you and showed you some kind of real mentorship, you were lucky. Generally, they're going to hit you with the stick if you don't behave,
Should I tell you a crazy fact about the school system in Germany? I don't know how it is if they have the same rule in the UK or America, but because I have some friends who became teachers in the last few years. In Germany, you are not allowed to go to therapy as a teacher in training because that implies that you're mentally ill, hence incapable to work with children. And that to me is, the school system, there's so many fuck-ups, but to me that's the worst of all. We send people out there taking care of our children, for like they are the people that have most often the most touch points with our children. And we refuse to give them access or to allow them to look inside, to work on themselves in order to become better teachers, better human beings. Like, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah.
No wonder we create fucking bullies, people who haven't worked on their inner wounds, on their childhood traumas when they were bullied by other children, by other teachers, by the parents, who knows? Dude.
Yeah.
Do you know if it's the same here in South Africa?
I highly doubt it. I think that certainly I've never heard of anything like that. But I do know we don't pay teachers well. So teachers are under huge stress and there's not enough resources. So, teachers are given a mission impossible. Kids crammed into the classrooms without resources, kids that are not getting the love and attention they need from their parents. So now they kind of need it from a teacher, but they're not even aware of that. So they're just demanding attention through all sorts of behavioral tendencies. There's not enough adults around. Like in a village situation, there's more adults than kids, because that's just the natural way of a village. You don't have like 40-1 children to adult ratio. It's outrageous, So all sorts of weird psychological, and we've broken children into age rank, which is not a good way of grouping children. There should be different age brackets. Like it's the same with adults. Like if you put a whole bunch of 20-year-olds together, they'll behave in a certain way. It'll be wild. If you put a whole bunch of adults together where there's an age range of 20 to 80, very different dynamics will occur because people will be interrelating in different ways. They know they're being witnessed. There's an eldership rank that's there. Obviously there's other factors that are important, but the moment people are broken into age ranks, like a whole different weird power dynamic emerges. And often what will happen is the ones who will take power will be the ones who are capable of taking power, either because they are stronger or because they want power, which is not the ones you want in power.
That's the case with most quote-unquote alternative schools like Montessori and Waldorf, right? They operate that in the way that kids from all kinds of different ages are put together as one group.
I hope so. I don't know enough, but I'm sure that they would include something along those lines. But I do know that teachers are given a hard time. And I think they work under huge stress. And as a result, their mental health in South Africa is, I think, known to not be that good. And they often appear not to care. And meanwhile, they're paid nothing to take on an impossible task. So I think it's tough to be a teacher. And I think that's an indictment on our society at large. We disregard teachers as people. If they can't do, then they teach. and it's outrageous. It's like some of the most important people for children's development is teachers. And over the weekend, I did this mentoring workshop, and one of the things that emerged is that you have these 4 houses that you grow up in. And the first house, this is thanks to Nick Fine, who led this workshop. It's quite profound. The first house that we live in, do you know which one it is? It's a conceptual house, but it's the first house that you and I have ever lived in for quite a long time.
What do you mean by that?
It's a structure in which we live.
Uh-huh.
It's tricky. I didn't get it either. Our mothers, the womb. That's our first house.
Yeah.
So we are incubated inside this womb, and our mother is this home structure that we exist within for like 9+ months, And that's our first house. And of course, the relationship you have to your mother is everything. It's nutrients, it's vibration, it's energy, it's all of these different qualities. That is your first experience of life, you're getting from your mother. I got to jump now. Remember I said Ingoma is the medicine of the Xhosa people? Ingoma is song. And it comes from, according to a wonderful man, Sisonke Papu, a Sangoma, an incredible cultural representative, who says that Ingoma means ngomama, comes from the mothers. That heartbeat that we hear is that the root of the beating of the drum. So that medicine is starting in the womb, and that first house that we have is our mothers. Then we're born, and of course our mothers are still there and circling and nurturing us. Then we move into the house of our fathers, theoretically, which might be our actual father or our uncles or the men in our society, but it's the structures that have been built to protect and house the woman while she does this sacred and wonderful act of bringing us into life. So then we live under our father's roof, or under the roof of the fathers. But the third house is the mentors. So that's where we really begin to develop, because our fathers can only really be our fathers. They're there for a specific purpose. They can be our mentors in some ways, but they're not meant to be. You're meant to have multiple other men and women from the community and from the village who you're naturally drawn to as a child. So the one who wants to do this starts to spend time with the hunter, and that one with the builder, and that one with the gardener, and that one with the healer, or that one with the leaders and the elders. And the children they get a broad education, but they slowly are pulled towards where they are drawn to their mentors. And that mentorship is the third house. And then theoretically, the fourth house is the house we build, which I like to say is the house that we build for the ancestors, so that we may become an ancestor ultimately by, bringing through the next generations. So,
ooh, I love this. That's
it's beautiful.
Such a unique and at the same time rich perspective.
And so you see how much mentors mean, and
totally.
At that age when you're meant to get them, let's say 10 to 15, 10 to 18, 10 to 20. I mean, you're meant to have them your whole life, but I don't want to discredit the mentors I did have when I was a teenager, but they weren't enough. There might have been the odd rare moment where some English teacher, gave me a little bit of extra attention or something, or some kind of little piece of connection that started to give me what I needed as a young man, which is confidence and a sense of like purpose and a sense of self-belief and how can I be in service to the community, and a feeling of, okay, wow, this person cares where I end up. They're not just pushing me through like a cookie cutter situation, So the first mentors I got was when I was 21, 22, who I love to say was a gay Afrikaans Buddhist psychologist. Who was
that's a wild cocktail.
Hey, what a lovely man, Johan Verster. He was wonderful, and I was recommended, I think, by my mom or someone who my mom told after I had this huge and painful breakup with a woman in my 21 who I thought would be my partner, and it was a whole tragedy. But I went to see him out in McGregor and spent a few days, and he was one of these therapists who had no intention of like keeping me as his client. He listened deeply. He gave me, through his own life, in many ways, he gave me permission to craft who I am the way I want to. I don't have to fit the boxes that I was taught by school I need to fit into, So he gave me a huge sense of like, agency, basically. Like, hey, and not always with just saying it, just by being who he was, but also listening to me deeply. And then he would just give me books to read. Like he told me Hermann Hesse, Narziss and Goldmund. He just listened to me one time. He said, you must read that book. Come back when you've finished it and lived it. Because Narziss and Goldmund is it's so beautiful. I recently read it again. It's such an important book for me because Narziss is this wonderful scholarly monk, in Germany and whenever it was. And he epitomizes that archetype of the young man who's like devoted to God and devoted to spirituality and to service of the great texts and to holding a particular vibrational frequency of study and dedication and devotion in a monastic sense. So, chastity and all of these vows, etc. Goldmund is this young boy who's been dropped off by a father who clearly doesn't care much about him, and I think his mother had died and his mother had loved him. And he becomes he's this golden boy within the monastery. He's brilliant, and he loves Narziss, and so they form like a mentorship type of relationship. But Narziss can see that Goldmund is not meant to be a monk. He's got too much life in him. He's meant to be an artist. He's meant to be an adventurer. He's meant to be a poet, whatever he's meant to be, a father even. So he encourages Goldmund against Goldmund's wishes. The young boy wants to stay and become like also a great monk. And, breaking his own heart, Narziss is like, you must go. And he can see, this boy's spirit is not meant to be this. So Goldmund, does eventually leave and, ends up going on this like incredible journey of romantic encounters and ends up murdering someone in self-defense, but nonetheless murders someone and has to live with that process of becoming a man who's killed another man. He becomes an incredible sculptor, like he becomes a disciple, not a disciple, whatever the word is when you...
You mean the German word?
Well, they have those guilds, remember, of us like...
The Schmied?
No. So in the guild, you're an apprentice. So he becomes the apprentice to this like world-class or like incredible sculptor, and he ends up doing a couple of these profound sculptures that everyone's just like, whoa. And I don't know if I should give away the whole story, but basically it's a tragic and difficult and painful tale, but he lives his life that way. And they meet near the end, and it's like very poignant of Goldmund's life. And what Johan was seeing in me was something that is in many of us, is the one part of us that we long to be monks, like the part that wants to be pure and like have the type thing, have the conditions that allow us to live according to what we've been expected. Like, because the only way you're going to become like Jesus really is if you go and become monkly, I mean, it's like, you need to go live in the desert, you need to fast, you need to meditate, you need to pray, you need to be devoted, you need to be pure and clean. You can't just be like awash in all of society's distractions. But then the other part of us wants to live, man, and like live by our bodies and live with the passion for life and taste all the fruits that life has to offer, even if they're going to sometimes wound us in the process, So, for me, I still battle. Both of those are alive in me.
Same, dude.
And I love them both.
You're speaking from my soul. Do you know that German saying? Speaking from one's soul.
How does it sound auf Deutsch?
It's, du sprichst mir von der Seele. Aus der Seele?
Okay.
Dude, I've been speaking so much English. Nice. I'm losing.
No, don't lose it. You must read some Hesse in German. I wish I could read Hesse in German.
I recently, half a year ago, I read my first book by Hesse, which was Steppenwolf. Have you read Steppenwolf?
I'm rereading it right now for the second
Dude,
time. Yeah.
How?
Yeah, maybe the third time.
How insane is that book? How psychedelic is that?
Bro, it's weird reading it at my age now because I'm kind of his age. So I read it when I was your age. Yeah. And he's this like late 40s, early 50s type of dude. And I'm like approaching that now. So now suddenly the Steppenwolf's not just like this character.
You have quite a similar personality, right? You are...
No, I wouldn't say personality. He drinks a lot. He's prone to kind of depression. So no, I wouldn't say similar personality. I think we're very, very different. But I recognize him in me, and I recognize the potential for me to end up there. It's like if I kind of gave up a little bit, I'd become the Steppenwolf. Yeah. And I just resonate deeply. And I mean, like Hesse is probably my favorite author, Huxley and Hesse, but like...
Funny, dude, I'm at the moment reading A Brave New World dude, for the first time.
Bro, that book started my entire spiritual journey, bro.
Really?
That was the blue pill or the red pill, whichever one it is, for me in my life. Like I was given it when I was 18. I don't think my mom, it was a mom's friend who, funny enough, my mom's living with right now because my mom's renovating her apartment. So it's one of her childhood friends. I don't think either of them knew. She gave me Brave New World and I read it and it just like completely opened my mind to like all sorts of things, like our society, the future potentials, like the use of psychedelics, like these alternative ways of relating that and then Island is that's the counter book to that.
Yeah, I've read it in the introduction. I'm only a few chapters in.
So I also read it in the order you're reading it, which is Brave New World first, then I read Island. But Island is the utopian version and Brave New World is dystopian. But they both use psychedelics in quite specific ways as a form of mental health moderation. But in Island, it's much more, they call it moksha in Island.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's soma in
exactly.
Brave New World. And there it's like to take either a holiday, it's kind of to help make you more compliant with the system in Brave New World, isn't it?
Yeah,
I haven't read Brave New World for 20-something years.
I mean, like the way I experience psychedelics personally, as well as when I look at
in the book, society. I'm not talking about society. In Brave New World, so much.
So it's the exact opposite of how psychedelics work.
Exactly.
Or being used in this
So in Ireland, that's how moksha is used, the way we use it theoretically.
Yeah.
It's like given to the children at 13, it's mushroom, it's a form of mushroom, and they go and have a rite of passage up in the highlands of the island, taken to like be shown the wonders of the world and how we're all united, like used very consciously to initiate young people into a spiritual way of being mature adults. So that's what's nice about Ireland. In Brave New World, the soma is used to bring compliance, if I remember correctly.
I'm not there yet.
Okay. It's a small piece of it, but like if I remember, the alphas get sometimes dissatisfied.
Yeah.
And that's the main character. So he's like questioning this weird society where he's at the top, but he's expected to be promiscuous, if I remember correctly. You're not allowed to have like long-term relations. You mustn't get too emotionally attached.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't talk or think about the
But
savage
it sounds
areas.
quite like the 2020s or the 20s we are living in at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as bad. But what's interesting about Brave New World is that it's a really interesting reflection of where we could end up in 200 years or 50 years, who knows? Because that's 600 years after Ford. That's the timeline of Brave New World, which is Henry Ford in the production line of the car. And it's like, oh, production, like, because they're production line humans, don't they? They're like, they hatch us, and then they make the different tiers, the different classes. It's a cool book. Anyway, we're jumping again, which I love. But yeah, so Huxley, Hesse, but you should read it in German, because I'm often wishing that I could.
Hesse in German.
Like, because there's different translations, and I've sometimes taken two translations of Hesse and read the same page.
No, I always prefer to read a book in its original language, for sure, yeah.
And
I mean, Hesse's German is magnificent. It's uniquely deep. I was having a discussion with another guy on Substack last week who criticized Hesse's style for being like over dramatizing, and then I was basically saying, dude, well, maybe you just can't, you don't know the experience Hesse had, you know, the depth. And I was like, you know, my ego was,
I mean, Jung was his analyst, wasn't it?
Pardon?
He had Jung as an analyst for a while.
Did he?
If I remember correctly, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he was very influenced. So that's why I like, because obviously Jung's one of my favorites. You know, but I've never read any Jung.
Oh, really?
No, I mean, like, I almost feel like I don't need to, because he's permeated so many of the texts I read. So it's like, you know, to actually go and sit and read Jung, I haven't made the choice. Yeah. But obviously I just love him. So,
dude, I have recently discovered that a phenomena that Jung, apparently, I don't know if he was the first one who started or who conceptualized it, but I heard it for the first time and I found it deeply, deeply fascinating, and I keep contemplating about it, which is enantiodromia. I think I pronounced it correctly. It's the tendency of things to become their opposite at their extreme. You know?
Like the yin and the yang.
Exactly. Or to give specific examples of modern day society, hustle culture, people like, you know, Gary Vaynerchuk, Alex Hormozi, we had a chat about that on the weekend, which I would love to touch on as well. Or I did a podcast with, do you know Nathan Maingard?
I do, yeah.
Yeah? Dude, he dropped some proper bombs. I'm about to publish it, so when this episode goes live, the episode with Nathan will already be on YouTube. And he, earlier in the episode, he said, feminism is a big mistake, you know? And he gave some context, which I personally found valid and understandable. But, you know, the moment he said it, I was like, oh, dude, fuck. Like, the marketer in me was like, oh, perfect, thank you so much, great, you know, I can work with that. And then on a personal level, I was like, dude, if that podcast gets some reach, prepare for a proper shitstorm. So
depends it has to be unpacked, that statement.
Yeah, totally. That's the thing. But the thing is, dude, this is the reaction.
Even what does mistake mean? You know,
exactly. But your reaction is the one that, you know, that's the most mature one, I would say. I came out of the podcast and met up with a few people. I met up with a shamanistic psychologist here in Cape Town for like a vibe check for a potential podcast. Told her about that. Then I had a check-in by a call with a German friend of mine who's a doctor. And then later that day, I met up with our mutual friend, Ewan, who's also into man's work. And I told them about that podcast with Nathan, you know, and everybody had the same reaction. It was like, oh shit, what? What did he say? Like, oh, you know, and I was like, how interesting is that? People, like even these people who I would consider to have a certain foundation of, you know, reflection or critical thinking, they just reacted like, I would say, the broader majority of people on social media. Just instead of asking, okay, what's the context, you know, like, and what does he mean by mistake, and you know, and how do we define feminism, because it's a super broad term by now. and that's the problem I see in with like social media. I mean, the algorithms have completely disrupted society, and now I don't know. This conversation is about like we're going in every
But I mean,
single direction.
so I find regularly, and I have a huge. One of the reasons I don't post a lot to social media, and I've got a ton of content stretching back a long time, and I've had a lot of content do really well. So I'm aware of its power. But one of my issues with it is I don't want to feed, what I see to be something of a monster,
Yeah.
because it's hard to get off it. But at the same time, my counter point with it is the amount of incredible things that have been brought to me thanks to the algorithm that are exactly what I want to and need to see. Not things that are manipulating me into. In fact, some of them are like anti the algorithm and anti the system, but they're brought directly to me through Reels because, whatever, Instagram's been listening to me have conversations or whatever the reasons are. But I'm extremely grateful for what it's also brought. So I think like all things, and just like feminism, it's going to have a golden side and a shadow side. And, so to label anything as good or bad is always,
100%,
kind of
100%.
lacking,
100%.
awareness.
I totally agree with that. That's the thing, that's why I actually committed to never ask or try to never ask yes or no questions, such as, was feminism a good or a bad thing? Because it's like, well, not both and neither. It's a spectrum.
No,
it has a golden and a shadow. So this is like the polarity of life. This is Steppenwolf.
And how many types of feminism
Exactly.
are there?
Like,
what
is
ask each
feminism?
woman what it
Exactly.
means to them.
Exactly.
So
Oh, yeah.
it's just yeah.
But speaking of which, you said you're not a big advocate of social media or very active on social media. Let me go on.
Yeah.
You're more locally involved and active, I would say, which I deeply admire. I mean, that's actually one of my biggest ambitions with having made the decision to settle down after traveling around the world for more than 5 years and, having done retreats, masterminds, workshops all over the world. I'm seeking to build something sustainable locally. And in preparation for this episode, I always try to dig deep into my guest's personality and history, which social media can be very useful for. Okay. It was quite hard with your name, but I found something which I would like to read. And
I knew I should have purged my recent.
I'm very curious about how this lands, about your reaction. But yeah, I'm just going to start reading. A poetic parable for South Africa and the world about leadership, loss, and the magic we forgot we carry, by Craig Makhosi. In the village of Nelson's Drift, struggle was a familiar companion.
Are you going to read this whole story?
I'm going to read the whole story.
Oh, jeez.
Woven into the soil, the stories, the silent glances passed between elders. But you wouldn't know it at first glance. Their eyes sparkled like dew jewels at dawn, and their smiles carried the lanterns of distant hope. For despite it all, Nelson's Drift had something rare, magic. It wasn't hidden or secret. It wasn't whispered about behind closed doors. It stood bold and beloved, an ancient rock rising from the sea, about 50 meters offshore, wrapped daily in a mist that shimmered gold from dusk till dawn. Even at night, the rock glowed softly in the dark, like a beacon holding space for the dreams of the village. In sunlight, it resembled old wood, dry, weathered, dignified, like the skin of a wise elder, untouched by time or tide. No one questioned its power. It simply was the village's quiet heartbeat. The elders say it got its power from Ubuntu, the Xhosa, Nguni, proverb that is described in Xhosa. Please excuse my pronunciation.
So it's like a horse riding click. There you go, Xhosa. Yeah,
okay. Good. The Xhosa, oh, there it is so hard. Proverb that is described in Xhosa as a person through other people, but translated to mean that we are who we are through all our relations.
Oh wow, I got it right even back then.
And that the power was enhanced when the rock was cast offshore by dark forces many moons before. Once a year, the whole village would gather at the cliffs and along the shore, gazing at the rock in reverence. They didn't need songs or rituals. Its presence was enough. In silence, all that was needed was spoken. Just looking at it seemed to calm the clouds and coax the sun into a warmer smile. But not this day. The sea roared louder than even the oldest fisherman could remember. The sky grumbled, the wind bit, and the clouds descended like clenched fists. Whispers flew. Some said the ancestors were angry. Others feared the wrath of a distant god. Some fishermen had made their way to the shore through the gale, early that morn, staring across the water at the rock. And what they saw sent waves of shock and sorrow echoing through the village. The rock had cracked. It broke in silence, like the end of a dream. One moment it glowed, the next it was gone, swallowed by the sea. News swept through the village like wildfire. Shutters slammed, faces buried in palms. It felt like a prophecy fulfilled. Without the rock, what remained of their magic, of their unity, of their hope? When night came early, heavy and thick, fear clutched the hearts of the people. Then came the dawn. Soft, serene, almost embarrassed after the storm's fury, no one stirred. No one, that is, except the boy. He was young, but already more curious than afraid. He loved the shore, the way sand squelched between his toes, the sideways dash of crabs, the translucent threads of bluebottles. Beautiful, though untouchable. He loved the gulls, the hush, the thunder of waves, and the stories written briefly in the shifting sands. He had loved the rock too, but not in the way others did. He saw magic everywhere, in the breeze, in his village, in himself. That morning, he saw something else. Light. Scattered across the shore, half buried in sand and glinting in the shallows, were glowing fragments of the rock. The very one lost to the sea the night before. The boy's eyes widened, not in fear, but in recognition. The magic hadn't died. It had come home. He gathered the fragments in his arms and ran, calling out, laughing. The villagers peeked from their shuttered windows, at first unsure. Then, as the elders stepped forward to examine the boy's treasure, joy returned like birds to a silent tree. They followed him to the beach. They wept, they danced, they joked and sang and passed around pieces of the rock, holding it like a newborn or like a mirror to their own power. Because now they understood. The rock had never been the source of their magic. They were. Closing thoughts. Sometimes what we fear as a loss is actually a return. Sometimes what breaks apart is just breaking open. And sometimes what once felt far away comes ashore when we're finally ready to hold it. In situation of injustice and crisis, how can we hold compassion, faith, and action that brings positive change?
Sounds like it's been rewritten by ChatGPT. I don't remember writing most of those words, but that was, I think, written about 12, maybe more years ago.
It was published on Medium on May 23rd, 2025.
Yes, I think I was going to start publishing old things, and I think it's the one thing I published. I wrote it around 2013, 14, somewhere there, and it's meant to be about Nelson Mandela, obviously. And
the headline is Palestine.
Palestine.
Where's Mandela when we need him?
Oh, wow.
So, dude, I've read this essay
a
handful of times now. I find it beautiful, the story.
Thank you.
And the words you've chosen. But I've kept contemplating about the headline. And yeah, I'm just, you said you've written it like some 12, 13 years ago, and then published it when apparently when the Palestine-Israel conflict escalated.
Look, the Palestine-Israel thing's been a thing for a long time, and it's had flares over time. So the thing is, Mandela died, in 2013, and it was for me quite a tragic thing to see how miserable he looked and how he was like brought out by the president at the time to kind of be like this final like approval of the ANC, but the guy did not look happy.
But he was like what, 19?
He was 90 something. Yeah, he was old. But so the rock was him, and the rock falling was him. So I remember writing it around the time when he died. That was the idea. And then the point is that we all carry Mandela in us, and all the people they made Mandela. Mandela's not like the one magical black man, It's like he was representing a particular consciousness that I think was like the real golden nugget that comes out of, Ubuntu culture. And of course, it was drifted from. That's why I called it Nelson's Drift, because as a country, we've drifted so far, in my judgment, and at that time especially so. And in many ways, like it's for me, it's the new South Africa has been a constant disappointment, you know. But and it's filled with magic and beauty and the things I love and appreciate. But ultimately, we're still the most unequal country in the world, and it looks like most people don't think or care that much about that fact. So the other piece. Yeah, it was a way of coping for me and saying like, hey, actually, we all have to realize that we are all the Mandelas and we are all the people that Mandela was representing, and we need to activate that within us. And it comes to compassion and not being divisive. I still see all this, division politics, and it's difficult for me because we also live in a divided world. So it's kind of like the yin yang again, or the Tao. Like, yes, we are one. Yes, there is unity consciousness. And Rob spoke about being in that field where it's like, oh, wow, we're all one and we're spiritual and we're God and we're life and this is magic and it's epic. But he said it was boring. It gets boring, which I understand. But also, if we were all one and had remained one field, then all we would be is one pulsating vibration of either nothingness or somethingness, whatever existence actually is at its core. But in order to have this experience of life with love and joy and pleasure and peace and beauty and magic and all the wonderful things, there has to be those equal opposites. There has to be the yin and the yang in the polarity. So there will always be suffering and misery and cruelty and hatred and violence. And there's never going to be a perfect time when it's all healed and the world becomes whole. It's not possible. Like, there must be polarity, and there must be equal, and there must be balance. So for me, it's been this process of going, okay, what part of me is trying to be the rescuer, trying to be the fixer, trying to like solve the world's problems, the inequality in South Africa and the racial issues and in Palestine and all the different ways, like the male-female dynamic and the masculine-feminine. And then there's like, okay, one part of me, like my truth is working towards bringing healing. Like that gives me meaning, it gives me purpose, and it brings me joy. And I love doing that. I also love not having to worry about trying to fix the universe, but I tend towards doing that. It somehow makes me feel safer, I think. But ultimately, there's that other part of me that knows the world is the way the world is meant to be, and everyone's going through what they are going through. And, I think this gets called spiritual bypassing, because of course, if something really matters to someone and someone else is like, well, all things are as they're meant to be, it's going to sound like it's not favorable, but it's a truth. So everyone has to figure out what their truth is and how they choose to act. Anyways, thank you for reading that. Now you've reminded me, I published it a few years ago. It's interesting because I was thinking like, maybe I did. No, ChatGPT wasn't then around, I don't think.
No, it was. I mean, I know when
I'm like, damn, that's quite well written.
maybe it was hidden somewhere.
Maybe too many words as well.
You touched on something I was hoping to discuss with you, which is a topic that I've been thinking a lot about ever since coming to South Africa, which is the racial inequality, injustice here. And to me, it seems like in a place like Scarborough, this little hippie, white-only hippie village, really, where I've been living in the last 2 months, or even in a place, we got places like Scarborough, or Oranje, right? That white-only republic.
Yeah. I watched that documentary recently about
what? So a openly racist town.
Possibly one of the few honest places.
Yeah, exactly. And then we got places like Hout Bay, where the two of us have lived as well. And I watched a Vox report on the weekend outlining that, segregation still exists nowadays. I mean, that report was a few years old, but the numbers, they analyzed the numbers of the place Strand, where you have like a clear, the place is clearly divided. You got Strand on the one side with like 90%, 98.3% access to pipe water, 51%. In Strand, you got 93% pipe water access. And then Nomzamo, the other side of that town, literally only divided by a road. The people living in there only have like 49% pipe water access. In Strand, you got 51% people who have internet access. In Nomzamo, it's only 24%.
I mean, these statistics are, like there's way worse statistics, and there'll be areas where it's way better. But it's for sure the disparities and the differences are massive
But
in this country.
it's quite representative, isn't it? And then ultimately in Strand there are 83% white people, and in Umzamo 92% black people. Plus there's this one statistic saying that 60% of the black population of South Africa is living in townships. And of course, we've got systematic racism, if you want to call it like that, everywhere in the world, be it Los Angeles, Madagascar, Berlin, it's everywhere. Right. But I keep wondering, also because I heard that it's only 7% of the population in South Africa which is white, that it seems so surreal to me. Like almost every day, when I drive from Scarborough to the city of Cape Town, I pass so many different
Ocean View.
social classes, and it is surreal. And I think everybody who's been to South Africa has had a similar experience. And I just keep wondering, like, how is that possible? And I keep wondering, and I don't want this to be some virtue signaling thing, but I'm really interested because, by having made the decision to settle down here in South Africa, I feel kind of like an obligation, but also a curiosity to learn more about the socio-politics in this country as well as the history. But it seems, and I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. To me, it seems like a lot of white people don't care, have become numb. In our place Scarborough, it's like they're like about 2,000 people apparently, all whites, and the black people come in every morning with the buses to work for minimum wage, and then they leave again in the evening, and it does not feel right to me. It doesn't feel right. And then I drive through the city of Cape Town and I see homeless people in the streets, and I wonder, like, what's the right thing to do? Does it help if I give them money, if they give them food, or does that signal that by staying in the streets they'll be taken care of? Like, what's going on here, dude? And what can we do to become Mandelas in our everyday life?
Yeah, that's a huge question, or many questions wrapped in. So I wonder, I could talk for hours about it. And I'm wondering what's the most important. You said something to me at the beginning, which is that I'm quite rare on social media or whatever it was, which I think is something I might have said to you, or that I'm more local. And it is something that is more important to me. I think I could make more money if I focused on being out there and, work with scale and like appeal. And I still kind of intend to, because at this point I need to support my endeavors. I don't have sponsors or anything. So, but working local is, I think, always the right place to start. So that's why I don't get involved in the Palestine-Israel politics. Like, for me, it's a tragedy, and both sides are suffering or will suffer or have suffered. So to try and pass judgment, and I got friends who are brilliant and they know every single detail, and it's so complex and it's so layered, and I mean the history goes back a long, long way. And ultimately, for me, I always try to look at the psychology behind these things. What has created this tendency towards power, inequality, prejudice, etc. in the human condition. And it ultimately is pretty obvious. It comes down to the moment there's competition for resources, people have to cluster into identity groups in order to survive. It's just the way it works. It's simple. So it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, if you want to get your basic needs met, you need security, you need resources. So if you try to do that as a solo person, you'll get wiped out quickly. All our ancestors have learned that lesson. So there comes a time when you can be super noble and super like, I'm going to do like the right thing. But it's like, if you're in competition for resources and you want your children not to die, you may actually have to either kill other people or make sure that other people's kids don't get access to that water or that food or that land. So there's this kind of horrible realization that I think we all have to go through, which I've certainly gone through, which is like, oh, wow, actually, this is just programmed into us. Like, we have capacity for violence and for cruelty, especially when it's to protect our loved ones. So this is that yin yang thing where it's like, I think that the ability to really be violent and cruel and abusive to others, ironically, comes from this deep need for safety and to protect what we think is valuable. So like, everything that you could look at is going to be very perverted and often hard to try and unpack. But that's just how complex our history has been, especially with industrialization and the way that caused this explosion of population and at the same time disintegration of culture, things that kept humans noble. That's why we have culture. That's why we have rites of passage, because the elders know humans are inherently dangerous. This is not one of those things where it's like bonobos and chimps, are we like violent rapists unless we're conditioned? No, like it's about conditions. It's like if we have our needs met, we're wonderful beings. If our needs are not being met, we will move more and more towards needing to get those needs met. And if violence is one of the ways you can provide for your children, you will take it. Every adult, and again, Rob mentioned that thing where it's like you have a boundary, and if someone's threatening your children, he said, "Are you joking?" I could hear it in his voice. Like he would be ultra violent if needs be to protect his family, which is exactly what you want to have in a human or in anyone, because that's how we protect our children.
Yeah, I mean that's one of Jordan Peterson's most famous lines,
which is
a man needs to learn how to be dangerous and then learn how to control it.
Yeah. So, and there's this whole warrior in a garden kind of philosophy as well. So at the end of the day, there's a realization for me that's like, oh, all of this morality stuff that the religions like to go on about and all of us like to go on about. Like, this is why I love Buddhism, because morality is not about better than, it's about smarter. Like, if you don't want to suffer, then don't go hurting other people. Don't go saying certain things. Don't sexual misconduct. Like, it's all about whether you want to suffer or not. It's not actually moralistic. They're called morals, but I think they're more like, it's called Shila, morality. It's literally a practical set of guidelines to not be in misery. It's not saying like you will go to hell, but theoretically you will if you do those things, because there's a consequence to actions. So that's why I love Buddhism to this day as one of my ways of understanding the world. But at the end of the day, the psychology of humans is going to end up divisive at some point, especially when there's competition for resource. And once one person has had a tragedy, or one family has experienced a tragedy where another family who were under trauma or under threat or whatever, they took an action on this one, and then they suffered a massive and then it becomes
hurt people hurting people, and that becomes so layered that to even suggest, and remember, there would have been times in history where someone was, oh yeah, no, let's forgive. And they went and offered a peace branch. And then the other side's like, hang on, those guys did that, but then they tricked us and it was a Trojan horse and da, da, da. So then they actually killed them quick. And then you watch Game of Thrones and you see it happen there. And it's in our psychology. Like, no one really trusts anyone. And that problem of trust, which is so difficult to rebuild, is that you end up in situations where it literally is just the smarter thing to do to preemptively strike. And like white people, looking at our history, looking at what we went through in Europe for the last couple of thousand years, which is like what happened to black folk in Africa. And I don't want to compare because it's horrendous. Like, most of my adult life is still dealing and carrying the shame and the feeling of guilt at what I received through my privileges based on what was done to African people and indigenous people and animals and the land. So it will never be to minimize what happened here, but like compared, the same things that happened here in some way has happened in Europe for 2,000 years and longer. So in a way, when I started to look at my ancestors over long periods of time, especially European, I started to realize, oh wow, this trauma is so deep. Like the Romans were doing to my and to our and to the indigenous people of Europe, with religion, with language, with culture, with civilization, with modernity, with all of these things, with violence. They were doing what then white people eventually ended up doing in Africa or wherever else people with power and access to technology and weapons could do to people who didn't. And often they were nice at first, but then the moment there's a conflict of interests and the locals are like, actually, we don't like you here. Like, we were friendly at first, but now you're taking our stuff and we don't dig it. Then there's conflict, and then boom, the ones with the weapons or the technology ultimately end up winning. Just like the Egyptians suppressing the Israelites in the Bible,
Yeah, I can't remember why they were doing what they were doing, but like, the whole Jewish situation as well in Europe. And it's threat, isn't it? It comes down to people feeling threatened. And then it's not just like we don't like Jews because they're this. It's like, it's ultimately people don't like people when they feel threatened. And when that fear is activated, people become quite irrational and inhumane in a way. They forget that like this will have consequences down the line, because they're in an immediacy context. It's like, this person's going to take what is vital for my children or for me to have safety. So for me, it's been quite a difficult path, because on the one hand, it's like, again, Narziss and Goldmund in a way, it's kind of split, where one part of me is like, I care and feel deeply about these dynamics of justice through the lens that I'm seeing it and through this perspective. And I want to act and I want to bring contribution and I want to try resolve and help and heal and fix. Partly because it helps me feel safer in the world. So not even just because I'm some amazing human.
No, we all act ultimately based on egoic
Totally,
desires.
totally. There's the self, as you know, the capital letter self. So that's another beautiful debate. I think that we aren't really taught well as in our culture, I don't think. But then you have this other part of me, at least, that I think a lot of us have, which is like, I can't solve everything. The universe is always going to have conflict, violence, inequality somewhere. And theoretically, I mean, I believe in karma. So everything is happening. Everything has a consequence and action, reaction. And everyone's going through their process and what they are supposed to go through to bring them ultimately to their realization of oneness, unity, whatever it is that we might eventually reach down the line. So who am I to interfere? Who am I to like come in as the blazing white savior who's like here to fix everything because, oh, I'm so privileged that I've had the time to like read books and now I know that, you know, actually there's all this injustice. You can keep digging deeper and you will always find another point of departure of where there was an injustice or why someone was justified. So it's I can't remember the term for it, but it's a loop where you can also get stuck in and then not act locally. Yeah. So for me, it's like, how do I balance contributing to my community so that it becomes more like how I want it, which might mean mentoring young men from the townships or supporting people in this or doing men's work, creating a broader field. But I'm aligned with what my intentions are and my motivation. It's not because I'm the good white guy. I happen to present as a good white guy and I'm a nice guy, you know, but like I'm as capable, bro. I'm as capable. And sometimes I like long to be as wildly, you know, ferocious because it's a part of me that it does exist. So I think, that balance between not rescuing and not, as you say, virtue signaling as well, because that's also just bullshit. You know, it's like, I prefer a slightly more honest take. I get a lot from helping other people, and that's why I do it. But I also am not trying to rescue because then I'm not actually helping them. So it's an interesting one. How can I create situations where I am benefiting and they're benefiting, and we're building a society where I might actually feel safe enough to have children in? Because that's one of the, I mean, I'm going through a huge process of like, why have I not found a partner? Why have I not had children? Why have I had abortions? And why have I had this whole tragic story around becoming a father, you know? And it's like, I don't feel safe on this planet. And I don't feel safe in this culture. I don't feel safe in the society, you know, ironically, because I have a very safe life, you know, like I often don't have to worry about pretty much anything. And yet, on a global level, seeing what I've seen since Brave New World, you know, and since Island, because Island's not a happy ending either, you know, it's like, since seeing what I've seen, since I started watching documentaries and started really like interrogating what the status quo is, I don't feel safe, bro. I don't trust, you know, I don't trust where humanity is going. And
I mean, we can back it up with like the most shocking statistics I found, where that they are like, to this day, you know how many murders are happening every day in South Africa?
It's one of the murder capitals.
Pardon?
It's one of the capitals of the world.
Yeah.
For numbers.
Like 60 to 80 murders a day.
Yeah.
Those are numbers of a fucking war zone, dude.
Yeah, dude. Well, the townships are very hectic, bro. You know, when I hear the stories of my friends and how their daily lived experience is, it's why I struggle to go to somewhere, I don't want to say Africa burn, but it's like, it's why I struggle to go to any place where there's some sort of energy of just like, yay. And then I see there's the cleaners at the toilet and I speak to them in Xhosa. And this has been it's one of the difficult parts of speaking Xhosa. I always want to warn people. I'm like, hey, if you want to stay in your bubble, don't learn Xhosa. And I think it's why most people don't, because as soon as you start learning the language, you realize that, oh, I actually have to have human conversations with these people, like real life ones. They're not just the friendly, smiling toilet cleaner or domestic worker or gardener, or, you know, suddenly they're actually humans having a lived experience with a whole lot of story. And if you really want to have conversations with them, then you start to quickly realize what people are living through. Yeah. And it's, you know, then another favorite one is, oh, it's the ANC. They've got this much money since then and they could have changed things. It's like, with that budget, as big as that budget may be, no one could have fixed South Africa with what was created. I mean, you were giving those stats earlier. Like those forced removals were so effective at creating segregated zones. There's no way to like actually undo those in a fair way.
It started with the gold mine economy back when the British discovered diamonds here in South Africa in the 19th century, and because that was more up north of South Africa, and they built these railways to bring the diamonds down to Cape Town, right? And that's where all the money was flowing. So you only got these. And these railways pretty much just went through Joburg, Pretoria, Durban, and then eventually Cape Town. And those are the economic centers. And like, it started there. It didn't start with apartheid. It started in the 19th century, you know, and the rest of the country was kind of left out of that economic growth.
So, you know, you're opening cans of gigantic dune-shaped worms, because the problem, especially for white people, is that when we talk about any of this stuff, it opens up a lot of shame and a lot of guilt and a lot of terror that we're going to be, held to account, or that real reparations will happen and we'll lose our safety and our security and our privilege and things we've worked hard for. It's not like white people were all just given golden tickets. It's like a lot of white people's ancestors suffered hard, went through what they went through in Europe, came out here, went through their own things. People have worked hard to get what they got and have suffered a lot. And what people forget is that white people are just as capable of being horrific to white people as we are to anyone else. Yeah. So, people are terrified when these topics come up. And
that's why I hope to talk about this with you, and I appreciate your courage, dude. Like, I really do.
Sure. I don't know if I have the courage. Most of the time I keep quiet nowadays because it's for this very reason. So you're triggering people at the base of Maslow's hierarchy. You're getting them right in their security. So there's already a bizarre kind of lack of cognitive and emotional capacity to talk about these topics, because it's threatening. It's threatening to the safety and the privileges that we have. And privileges are, you get all sorts of types of privileges, but essentially the ones most relating to what we perceive to be safety and security are really important to us, so they're not things you want to give up, and everyone wants them. Everyone wants privilege, and even things like, education and homes, all of these things are linked to security now and security in the future. So it is a bit of a can of worms, and there's not really a clear conclusion to it all, but essentially, one of the things I wanted to say is, of course, apartheid was also a reaction of Afrikaans people, what they went through with the Anglo-Boer War, where the British inflicted all sorts of atrocities upon them. So, the British themselves are one of the most invaded islands in the world. And English itself is a testament to how many ancestral influences there are. English is a very messy language. I love it, but it's messy. Especially when I learned Xhosa, which is such a beautifully consistent, incredible language that just makes so much sense. And then you have English. And it's kind of a nightmare to learn English. It's not even phonetic.
Tell me more about that.
English is not a phonetic language, okay, which means it doesn't read the way it's written. The letter A can be pronounced 5 different ways: ape, arm, apple, air. That's 4. So in other words, when you're learning English, A does not always sound like A. Sometimes it's R, sometimes it's A, sometimes it's E. It's what's that about? Okay, why would anyone create their language to have one symbol representing different sounds? The whole point of the symbols of a written language is so you can read it. Okay, so why would you have inconsistencies? So the reason is because English is made up of, Latin, Germanic language, the Anglo-Saxons, French is in there, the Scandinavian Viking influence is in there. There's bits of, I don't know, there's all sorts of strange language. And then there's the Celtic sort of original languages, the Picts, etc. There'll be little pieces that come in from everywhere. But England is a very invaded island. And it's, it's a terrified island. England is used to being invaded, and it's since the times of the Romans, it's been a scary place. You look at the history of British kings. It's not like, oh, hello, would you like to be next? Sure, here you go, have your time. It's a whole bunch of dudes.
It was very impressive.
I was an actor in a previous lifetime. But the point is that there's a lot of skullduggery, to use a nice English word. Sons are killing fathers, are killing brothers, are killing, it's this power, and there was so much insecurity. So it's no wonder for me that England became the global colonizing force, because in some ways they were the most ruthless. And they had learned the lesson that the rest of Europe had also been learning, but perhaps a little bit slower, which is that you strike first, you strike hard, you get it all, and you control. You don't do this old day fashioned thing where the English and the French would meet, let's meet on that hill, tomorrow at noon. And then they line up and it's all right, you fire first, fire, our turn, fire. And then at the end of the day, oh, you guys won, well done, shake hands, go home, tell the king and queen, who cousins.
Did that actually happen?
If you look in the history of Europe, there was a time, certainly in general, there's a time when neighboring forces or neighboring lands have war, they often would do it with some degree of, even now there are codes of war, aren't there? Mm. I don't know if it's the United Nations or whoever, but there's war crimes. The things you can't do in war.
Yeah.
Which is a weird, what do you mean? People go into war because they want to win. Yeah. Now you're telling people oh, we actually couldn't really do that.
You're cheating.
You're cheating. Thank God we have that. Yeah. But so this is the irony of it all, But you can see the progression where when humans had the capacity to if we lose, we just move over that hill. We take our people and we migrate a couple of 100 kilometers, and there's more land there. Africa had a lot of that. Africa wasn't fully populated in the way that it was from the northern areas of Africa were way more populated than the southern tip. Sure. When whiteys arrived. It was obviously there were indigenous people who deserved respect. I'm not saying that, but in terms of population density, it was very sparse in southern Africa. Everyone had kind of gone north, and because of the Fertile Crescent, because it was more There was just more resource the more north you went. So yeah, like I think war has evolved, to a point where it becomes costly if you're gentlemanly about it. I mean, look at what America's doing now. There's nothing noble about the war that's being done now. And at the same time, we all sit here going, oh yeah, that's so horrible. But it's kind of like, yeah. And also like, well, do we want China in charge, or do we want Russia in charge, or do we want Arab forces in charge? I'm talking stereotypically. Like there's a little part of me that's like, well, at least Trump is kind of doing it for me,
For the West.
Yeah, for the West. And for white people, it's sort of. I don't really believe that. But on some kind of level, as much as I might be outraged, there's a little part of me that's like, well, rather Trump than, the Korean guy or the... That's not really...
Because you are mostly aligned with...
Oh, he speaks English. That's the first piece that helps. It's like, it means that... So think of it like this. If the world is going to be dominated by one race or one type of people with their language and their culture, I kind of would like it to be my people.
No, I got it.
Even though I'm horrified by what they do, if someone said, look, there's going to be someone at the top, someone who's bullying everyone else, someone who's controlling the resources, and like, you can be actually somehow affiliated to them or not at all. Obviously, the ethical part of me wants to like never have white children and like, live somewhere far. But like another part of me that is responding to the need for safety and security is like, oh, well, at least I'm not being forced to speak Mandarin.
No, I get it. I mean,
I'd love to learn Mandarin.
You're just speaking out what most people are just too afraid to speak out. Like as in the West.
I don't think they've thought about it. I don't know if they're too afraid.
True,
this isn't the stuff I'm scared to say. There's other stuff I'm way more scared to say, that was actually threatening. This is just kind of like, in fact, this justifies whiteness in a way, and it justifies for a lot of us how we can say, well, deep, deep, deep down, at least it's my people. And I think for me, that's kind of an important compassion piece, because then you realize, and it ties into this notion of like, for instance, in apartheid, Biko and others said that if white people want to be allies, they must commit class suicide. Okay, and I was watching a documentary recently that a friend's dad produced. It's called Untold Courage. And it's the story of a couple of white guys during apartheid who were very involved, like Beyers Naudé. And according to this film, I don't know if everyone would agree, but like Beyers Naudé was instrumental in bringing apartheid down. And he was an Afrikaans man who was on the Broederbond, which was like the echelons of Afrikaner power. And in Xhosa predikant or whatever, like a Dutch Reformed Church preacher. So he was like at the top of the Afrikaner nation when apartheid started, and even was justifying it through like from a godly perspective at first. Because I mean, there's arguments for apartheid that made sense, However, when you quickly realize that, because if there was equal resources for everyone to develop their own cultures, it would be amazing. If everyone was able to travel where they wanted, but like when you went to Xhosa land, it was Xhosa culture, but like with equal share of resource. Apartheid could have been amazing. It wouldn't have been apartheid. It would have been a magical, magical place where every culture was given what it needed to prosper. Mm-hmm. And then humans could choose where they wanted to go live and stay. But like, at least, look, it's a magical thinking, but
was that how they defended?
It was separate development. That's how apartheid was sold to everyone. Like, let the Xhosas live with their Xhosa vibe, and the Afrikaners will live with and the Sotho and the Tsonga and the Pedi, and let everyone live according to how they have always lived and want to live. But the piece that was left out is like, oh, but by the way, you guys all have to come mine the resources of the land, and we're going to keep it all, and we're going to get rich, and you can live in poverty, and you're going to see us with all our wealth, and obviously start questioning your own culture's value. Then that happens, and you start implanting all these inferiority seeds and exploiting the labor and paying people badly and destroying the family systems and all the stuff that was pure evil, And that stuff, which we are now still living the consequences of, that everyone, all the whiteys are like, oh, but we pay tax to the government, they should fix it. It's like, dudes, this what was set in motion a long time ago. And the people, black folk in government, whoever they are, wherever they are, who have tried their absolute hardest to fix. It's like trying to push the tide back with your hands. There's certain things that are just absolutely structurally entrenched. And that's just the way it is. So apartheid, if there had been equal distribution of resources and including everyone in a kind of wisdom council, wow, could have been a magical vibe.
It's the same utopia fantasy with every other ideology, right? I mean,
well, it's unrealistic because humans are humans. So the moment they're threatened, they're not prepared to compromise as much, and or compromise is also a risk. So there was still a deeper question, which was, I think, around apartheid is something that you need to also see through the lens of Afrikaans survivalism. It was genuinely a lot of people were like, this is our only way to survive. And like they had traumatic experiences with British and with black folk. What happened to old Piet Retief is like a classic story. And he's apparently one of my ancestors. So that was a huge betrayal by the Zulu folk they were helping. And it's like, so since then there's been the story of like, you might try help the black folk, but at some point they're going to turn around and impale you on spears,
So tell me more about that.
I don't want to get it wrong, but like the story of Piet Retief, as far as I recall, is that he was helping one of the Zulu kings with like because obviously they wanted to trade and they wanted, so they said to the king, like, he had an issue with a neighboring Zulu chief that was maybe, I don't know, dissenting or giving him problems. They said, we'll sort that out for you, and then we'll be your traders or whatever the story. So they went and they used their guns and they shot the other chief and came back to, I want to say Dingaan, but I can't remember now, man. So
what's Dingaan?
He's one of the Zulu kings, yeah. And I just don't want to like misname because, yeah. So, but the point is they came back and spies of the king had watched and he'd seen them with these magic sticks that smoke came out of, and then people fell down dead 20 meters away and they were like, what? So the story went back to the king. And he then welcomed in Piet Retief and his band of 30 white men who'd gone and, beaten his enemy. And he said, yeah, leave those magic sticks at the door and come in, let's feast. And then in the middle of the feast, or at some point in the feast, there was a war cry, or someone said, Bulalani abatagati, which means kill the wizards. Okay, but abatagati implies people who use magic for evil, to get
black
magic, so to speak, using it for selfish gains. So, and on that cry of Bulalani abatagati, the warriors all seized the white guys and impaled them. Either slaughtered them all, but impaled them on wooden stakes. So that's what impaled means.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of a horrible way to die.
From the context,
yeah. So, and that story would have gone and hit the ears of every single white person that ever stood foot on Africa. It's kind of like worst nightmare. You try and be nice and help, and then this thing happens, and look, it proves that they're extremely dangerous and untrustworthy, and barbaric, and they didn't understand that they were guns. They thought they were magic sticks. So it kind of reinforces a whole lot of belief systems that become a justification of sorts for an attitude that inevitably culminates in something like apartheid, And I remember I thought you were going to pull out something else from my past because I got other things on the internet. But I used to put out these some videos, and then I remember I'd have guys who would write that line. They would comment like people with the old South African flag as their icon would comment that under my posts. So I remember that was the first time I hit up against, because I'd be like, hey, let's all Mandela, learn each other's language, speak the hearts of the people, and which are beautiful sentiments and they're true and I believe in them. I really believe strongly in learning each other's languages. And the message of when we don't learn the language, I think white people are very unaware of what message we're sending, which is basically we don't care about who you are and where you're from, and that this is actually your ancestral land and you will speak to us in our language. That's the message that's just constantly being communicated. And it's damaging, which is why I've been quite like, guys, do you know what you're doing? And you expect this to last forever, So I've always been passionate about that piece, but that comment of what was said, kill the wizards, was a reminder. It alerted me, oh wow, I went and looked and I found that history and I heard that story.
So these people commented, kill the wizards under your
videos. So some white guy, with an old South African flag, he wrote that comment because it's
kill the wizards.
Yeah, but in Xhosa or in Zulu, Bulalani, it's the same, like Bulalani abatagati, because I think his point was, don't think they're your friends. Yeah. You can shake hands and sing a song and have a lunch,
that story,
but at a certain point they'll impale you.
Yeah,
and they're justified. I'm like, black rage is very, very justified.
Yeah, but
it's like when you hear the stories.
Radically honest thought. I mentioned that only 7% of the population in South Africa is white, right? And in regards of that racial injustice, you said South Africa is arguably the most unequal country of the world. I have the most vulnerable, the most radically honest thought in my head is just like, why is there no fucking civil war going on?
Well, you're asking another big question, but there's good reasons for that. And one of the reasons is, in a nutshell, that black people are intelligent. I would argue a lot more so than white people. We might have educational advancement, technological advancement, but I've always found the general intelligence of black people to be very astute. They understand human nature, human dynamics, etc.
So would you say there's the white people have some sort of conceptual education?
Well, yes, of course. The Western have more experiential, relational intelligence. You might call it spiritual intelligence, emotional, but it's not that obvious. It's all people are people at the end of the day. But culturally, something I've noticed as an example is that why are black people less racist than white people as an example? Because racism is kind of stupid. It serves a function if there's a specific threat, and the way I explained it earlier, but it becomes quite dumb at a certain point. Really, really just dumb. And even with that psychological understanding, So, and it shows you've allowed whatever that those unconscious fears and beliefs to override common sense. Like, oh, actually, at this point in the game, collaboration makes way more sense, and building parts of trust. So here's the piece that I'm using as my justification for what I just said around intelligence. Most black folk they know that a person is a person based on their values and principles and how they show up, not the color of their skin. It's like if you're going to trust people on the color of skin, then you're dumb. That's my point. And white people should have learned that lesson, because white people have killed lots of white people.
I mean, it's pretty much the same as if I said I'm Christian and I act everything but Christian. I cheat on my girlfriend. I don't give a fuck about.
Well, the hypocrisy is a big thing. Yeah. So for instance,
that's what racism comes down to, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's
judging a person based on certain traits rather than
that's prejudice. Racism for me is institutionalized systems of hierarchy regarding power and rank. Okay, so racism is an institutional structure. Prejudice is when you're like, oh, they're black or they're Christian or they're Catholic or they're Jewish or, they're tall or short. Prejudice can evolve across all sorts of metrics based on that kind of psychology we're talking about. Racism is a specific institutionalized system that's designed to benefit certain people who've been classified in a particular way. So it's like, okay, we'll classify them as white, them as black, them as colored, them as Asian, them as other, and then we'll distribute resources, power, rank, position accordingly. So it comes out of prejudice, definitely. Like racism is steeped in
prejudice is more on a personal level, and racism is as you said,
it's an institutional thing. Yeah, prejudice could be as a cultural level, a social level, an individual level for sure. Because I mean, it's the same way that in a white family of the same color, same religion, same language, there'll be prejudice towards the son who's maybe gay against that son. So then suddenly there's prejudice relating to sexual orientation. Or there's no, maybe that everyone's straight and so, oh great, that's all fine. Then it'll be like he's got long hair, or he's more inclined to art and doesn't like rugby. Suddenly there's prejudice from the father towards the sons. It's, oh, he's not a hunter. Oh, he's a vegetarian. I mean, it's like the white mind is so like designed to just, and this is, we're getting back to something I wanted to come back to. It's like the root of all of this is measurements. It's like the moment we started to measure things and compare things, and this is why it's a double-edged sword again. It's why there's a beautiful thing and there's a dangerous thing. It's like the moment that we evolved through those pressures of culture and society to a point where we started to innovate and create things, and we had to start measuring. The moment we started measuring the external world in order to build, in order to design, in order to create, we also started measuring ourselves. We started to create metrics of value for humans. So it's kind of like we unleashed this like hectic wounding, because that's why so many of us are still like, what were your marks at school? Which class were you in? What rugby team did you play in? Where did you rank on this scale? Are you a 7 out of 10? How much do your shoes cost? We're like constantly evaluating ourselves and others based on numbers, on metrics. Yeah. So those two things seem to have gone at the same moment. We like kind of unleashed them. At least that's how I was just thinking about it yesterday. And I was like, whoa, that's, at the same time brought us so many beautiful things. Like, we wouldn't be able to have these epic things without measurement. So measurement's not bad. Science is not bad. Maths is not bad. They're beautiful. They're magical. They're amazing. But like at the same time, they unleashed a kind of psychological pathway. This is just a theory, like in the Western psyche, which isn't as prevalent in a kind of pre-Westernized or pre-colonized cultures, from what I can tell, from reports, from stories, from fables, from those kinds of markers that we can still look at. It certainly wasn't at the hyper level that it becomes the moment you have numbers involved, because it becomes so obvious. Oh, he got that score, you're better. Whereas in another culture, you're not judging on the score. How many buffalo did you hunt? You're counting on, is he also kind? Does he also share when he captures all his buffalo? Should we make him chief? In a Western world, it's like we make him chief because he's like gets the most buffalo, But in an older way, it's like, well, hang on, he might get the most buffalo, but he pisses off all our neighbors and creates enemies. That's not good for the tribe. We'd rather have the guy who only gets 4 buffalo, which is enough, but like is really good at keeping peace, So it's about like metrics of value, I suppose, and I think that's where we're at this time in the world. It's like how do we reclaim that? And now I'm getting back to men's work, because like I think men's work, rites of passage, initiation, is how we start to help men, particularly because we're so programmed to like calculate and evaluate and measure. Like, how do we begin to reclaim that part of our psyche that actually can lead us more from a place of like holistic, integrated thinking? That's like cool. Metrics and numbers and measurements are always going to be important and great value, but they're not the be all and the end all. So yeah, it's complicated. I mean, the question you actually asked was, what do you do as a privileged white guy? And I mean, I will say some uncomfortable truths. A lot of my friends are from Germany and America, and they all live in my areas, and you're contributing to the inequality. You are. You're bringing in foreign currency. Like people are making things super expensive. Mainly white people benefit. Some black people trickle down a little bit, but mainly whiteys have got very wealthy off Airbnb and property sales, etc. So, and you can say, well, the government allowed that. And another thing I want to say about the government is that the ANC has been, in many ways great for white people. They maintained a status quo. And part of that is needing the leaders to become somewhat corrupt somewhere along the line. And you can always also argue that, well, if I was a freedom fighter for a long time and I finally got power and I was told, well, look, you're just going to get a mediocre salary in government to fix apartheid, or you can come and sit on a board of white people and become the blackface we need and get millions, or billions, and use that money to like enrich your wider family. Black folk are not living in little isolated houses.
We come back to our egoic preferences around safety, right?
Safety, but also provision, fatherly qualities of like, if you go like Xhosa, Black, Nguni, whoever people from villages, even our ancestors, they lived in clans. They identify as collectives of family. So you want everyone to prosper together. You don't want to go and live by yourself, isolated up in the house in your fancy thing. The chiefs were not that much wealthy in traditional kingdoms. They had more responsibility and they had more cows because they needed to provide cows in different contexts and for the good of the nation, security of the nation. But they weren't necessarily like elevated to like ridiculous, like in ridiculous ways. So I think it's, I've completely all the point jumping, but the thing about the government was just that, unfortunately, it was an inevitable conclusion that people would need to utilize that particular way to be able to provide for their families. And if they didn't, someone else would. But the thing is that corruption in the ANC has become an excuse for white people. Like, oh, well, we pay our taxes, and so we don't have any responsibility to solve this. Like, they've been given $500 billion, and it's like, yeah, guys, that money goes in all sorts of directions. It's still a fraction of what white peoples have. The statistics around land ownership are still like 80%.
I mean, if it's only 7% of the population,
but we own 80% of the land or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's crazy.
It doesn't work out.
And again, I feel kind of more safe with that statistic. So it's like I'm not wanting to judge anyone for holding on to their safety and their security. Like, I get it. That's why I'm not like, I don't know if I'm one of these people like give back the land. I'm like, it's not that simple. For me, it's more like, how do we contribute if we have privilege? How do we contribute to empowering communities around us? If everyone acted locally, something would change. And I think a lot of the corruption now that's in micro communities all around us, it happens because it's invisible. No one gives a shit. Scarborough, there's a few people I know in Scarbs who care about what's happening in the Red Hill community or Masiphumelele. There are people doing stuff.
Like the neighboring communities that are
the closest township location, a community that's challenged for resources. So I know people who are doing things, but is it enough? And is it a majority of people making a difference? No. Can everyone else manage? Most of them can't. Most people are stuck in the system where like they can hardly relate well to their wife, they can hardly provide for their children. So what, now they're supposed to take on some gargantuan issue like all the poverty in the townships that also is linked with decades and generations of buried shame that no one wants to really look at, which then if you do look at, you have to look at all your trauma from your own ancestors that goes back 2,000 years. So, as a human collective, I think like where I'm at is like, we are such a hurt species. And to get lost in like, black, white, Arab, Jew, Israel, Palestine, this, that is it's sliding into the division mindset, the apartheid mindset, and that separation consciousness, which is dangerous, And so it's like, how do we, and at the same time, unity consciousness that we spoke about is boring, to use Rob's, or it's just unrealistic because, I could sit there and go, everything's cool. Yes, you can kill my children. And yes, you can steal my land. And yes, don't worry because we're all one. Hallelujah, kumbaya, not reality, So, even the Buddhists will fight and kill if they need to, And so, it's like, how do we as individuals like maintain that balance? How do we make the right choices? How do we find a way to balance provision for ourselves and for our families and security and contribute to the communities around us who are suffering and who are struggling and don't have resources? And it's not an easy answer. So this is my answer to your question. What are you supposed to do? It's not simple and it's not easy, but you can act and you can do things knowing that you will benefit too. So you're not a rescuer. Like you're going to be, if you go and give food or clothing to people and start teaching in the township, you're getting something as well, and be conscious of it. It's a mutual exchange, And obviously teach a man to fish is better than just giving fish to people. And at the same time, what can we learn? Do we have to teach them how to fish, or should we learn from them other ways of being? And that for me is where like my main act is to learn Xhosa, to learn the languages of people around me where I can, to learn about their cultures, to learn about their healing systems, even if it's not super in depth. And it's not only just black people, it might be whoever I meet, but like learn from others and like, yeah. And I think where I've settled at the moment in terms of like, how do I make peace with my sense of how do I help the world is men's work, because it's like, it's so deeply needed. It touches every culture. Like we have men from Ocean View, Maspumalele, everywhere, ever, the richest sectors of society as well. And we're all there together going, whoa, we got wounded by our parents, wounded by our culture, wounded by society, wounded by whatever, by women, by, each other. So for me, that's a place where if we can start to repair self-respect and self-trust, self-belief in ourselves, and part of that is doing it with each other. That's Ubuntu. We actually need each other to do that. I don't think it's easy or maybe even possible to fully repair yourself and healing in total isolation. That's why you can go be like super Buddha on the mountains in Tibet and like hum and chant and epic and yoga, and then you go to your parents' home, and spend like 2 days and you're like swearing at them again and like screaming or whatever.
There's this beautiful quote by Ram
It's not a
Dass.
personal story.
Have you heard it? If you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family.
Exactly. So it's like, cool. Well, then how do you prioritize your relations around you rather than just your bank balance? Because everyone wants to do that. Bank balance first and then relations. I've chosen relations first, and I've paid for it. My bank balance is not amazing, and it's I don't have a home, I rent. I luckily have my ancestral support that makes me feel safe. So I have that ability to put myself in weird, not as stable as my culture would expect me to have had. But I feel it. I miss having a home, and I toy every day with kind of saying I will never own land in South Africa. Like I want to say that because I want to. You can call it virtue signal, but also it's a part of me that just wants to say like enough of this entitlement, because that's what it is. It's entitlement. And I battle with it all the time, bro, because there's people I love, and it's also part of nature, and it is what it is. And everyone's battling their own battles. So who am I to judge? And when I judge, I create misery in my life. So, and I create loneliness and isolation. So it's a tricky one. I just have to come back to making my own choices that align with my mission in the world and with my values and my needs. And then I have to do the best I can without causing harm to others and hope for the best, like that's...
to make it even trickier, maybe.
That's being a man.
No, I appreciate it. I really do appreciate it. I think you are the most actively involved privileged white guy I've encountered in South Africa so far, and even if you,
well,
if
I
you
enjoy
struggle with receiving it, no, I really do, and I appreciate all these. We are talking,
and I know
about
ones who are more
topics.
involved, just by the way. But anyway, yeah,
get them on here. We're talking about such complex topics. The history of South Africa and the entangled man. We're talking about hundreds of years of history and conflicts and whatnot. So I really appreciate not only you sharing your knowledge or your perspectives, but also like being unfiltered. And this is completely unscripted. You were not prepared for this at all. So I really appreciate that. And now, as I said, to make it even trickier, maybe, with like what would you change if you were to run for presidency in South Africa?
Oh, never run for presidency.
Well, if I forced you to.
What would I change? Okay, you're saying like what would I change if I had power? Because I don't think
with all the
have that much
with
power.
all the definitely.
So if I
with
had
all
power,
the racial injustice, the inequality, the 60 to 80 murders a day, what needs to
all
change?
of that is downstream from human self-esteem and dignity. Yeah. So, and I believe humans don't need to be rescued. I think we're incredibly capable of fixing our problems, like when we need to, and with just almost any resources. The stories are countless of what people have done. You can see it all over. So to be honest, I don't know, because most of the things that a good leader would do would get them assassinated very, very quickly. So I suppose what you're saying is if you knew you weren't going to be assassinated pretty much immediately and you could do what you wanted, I guess it's this thing of like saying rather than anti something or doing away with something, it's like saying, how do we move towards something that can be better? How do we empower humans to create? And I honestly really am not sure. I want to say, almost anything that I'm wanting to say right now, I have a counterpoint to. I think I would want rites of passage to be reintroduced, but then it's like, I can see how rites of passage can become toxic if they were forced on people. And you can't control the consciousness that exists within people. So it's like you can create the systems, but like the consciousness is what's important. So how does a leader influence the consciousness? Like what if Eckhart Tolle, okay, I know what I'd do. I've got it. Sorry, I've been thinking about it all weekend. I'd make the world a matriarchy. I'd hand it to women.
Set a man's worker.
A set of men's work, yeah. And by women, I'm not saying like, oh, we want female CEOs and we want like female generals who can bomb little children. I'm sure women are capable, although it's hard to imagine to the same degree as us because they know where children come from and we forget. But I think the world would be safer in women's hands. That is my judgment. And I don't think it's about like emasculating ourselves. I think that women really appreciate strong men and powerful men. What they don't appreciate is abusive, hyper-controlling, deeply insecure men, who are acting from ego. So I would probably I think if I had ultimate power, I would want the elders to make the choices, and particularly the women elders at this point. I think there's many men elders all the men elders that I would want for the role would all agree with me. And we would be there and we would be influential and we would act and we would do the things that we can do and we would play our role. And I think we'd be very happy. That's my judgment. But, and it's not about rank. It's just about, I think matriarchal wisdom knows what's best for humans. Because you see, we're at a point, this is how I see it, like we're at a point in human evolution where now we're like, it's inescapable that we are interrelated. The weather systems, the economics, the pollution, the ocean currents. It's like you can't escape. That's one of the reasons I don't have a home, because I don't know where I would go, bro. And when you read Island with Huxley, you realize by the end of it, like there is nowhere you can run. Like there's no part of this planet that's not being touched by the system. And that for me is terrifying. So all I can do is say, cool, well, where I am is good enough, But even though I regularly am not that satisfied in my privileged comfort, but it's better than a lot of places. So the point is, as soon as you realize, okay, cool, we're actually in this together, the counter argument is no, we're not, and we got to get to Mars. Oh, that's why Elon's doing what he's doing. And oh, okay, that's why these guys are trying. Maybe Bill Gates and whoever these guys are that supposedly are trying to like reduce the population. Well, that kind of makes some sense in some ways. Like maybe a lesser population would make sense. But I would never want to be involved in making choices around that. It's like I don't believe that's necessary. I think that there's just like it's an idiotic male perspective. Let's put it like that. So, but the undeniable reality is that we're interrelated. There's always going to be other people with other needs or the same needs, but personalized to them, who speak different languages, different cultures. So how do we start to make decisions that are actually from that perspective of like, guys, we're on this thing together and all of our descendants are going to be on this thing together. How do we create a reality that supports that fact? What are the choices that need to be made? So I would want multicultural elders to find their way to be able to do that. Because I mean, again, the issues are so like, if you choose just like one Chinese guy and one Russian, one South, then all the other elders are like, what about us? So how do you choose who becomes the elders? That's the first issue here. And then the second one is all of us, bro. How do you change? We all like what we have. People like what they have, bro. We like that the way electronic music hits, bro. We like some of the drugs we like to take. We like that we can get on a plane and fly over there, and then we can fly over there, and then we fly over here. We like that we can, brand things and create our own personal stuff and manage our own money. We dig what we have, bro. Even, I would argue, even the poor peeps, bro. They're like clamoring for those cell phones and clamoring for these things, You can say they're addictive, you can say they're designed that way, but like people are craving these experiences that technology is bringing. And again, some of them are amazing. There's a lot of things about the modern world that are epic. I don't want us all to become, bushmen and cavemen again. Like we did that for like millions of years, and we were probably happy for a lot of it, and probably bored for a lot of it. So I'm not, because I think about this a lot, and I don't have an answer. These are just some of the thoughts, But it's like, how do we create the conditions?
Well, how would
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, how would matriarchy change or impact what I call global masculinity crisis? If we take the numbers from the US, education.
Because it's just a leadership. Doesn't mean all men don't get to do what we do, to be our masculine selves and to like operate like those things don't have to change. I'm talking about more about like the elders of the tribe, like are ultimately led by women who are connected to birth and to earth.
But how would that solve those 60 to 80 murders a day down here in South Africa?
Look, if you think of it like there's the top of the mountain, and then there's like streams that run all the way down. You're looking at things that are way at the bottom of the stream, and you can spend all your time fixing those forever. But like if this is still, at the top of the mountain.
That's why I put you on top of the mountain.
Yeah, I like the top of the mountain, but it's cold there and you die quickly. So it's also not that airy. But the point is that if you can change those things upstream, those things will sort themselves out. Most of those men murdering themselves are because they're born into violent communities where there's a lack of resources and there's high competition. So they're not able to find the resources to be able to provide for a wife and children or whatever the story. There's not enough structure. There's not enough resources, not education. There's not tools for them to play with. This is why I wish Africa Burn would just start doing a Africa Burn each year somewhere in a new township and leave behind like a epic set of resources and tools and infrastructure. It's not ideal. The reason I always talk about Africa Burn is because I see it as where like the creative, intelligent, often heart-opened youth are, and like the ingenuity and the innovation, the creativity and the good intent that you see at places like the Burn are like unparalleled. I don't know anywhere else. That's why I'm always kind of more critical of the Burn, because I'm like, dudes, how much is wasted in the middle of nowhere, and how much of that is coming from a shadow place of not wanting to look at what's happening elsewhere. That's a whole thing to unpack. So it's not obvious. It's definitely not anyone there's fault. But so I think that if you started to change, and I mean, you're asking me impossible questions because I don't know how the matriarchy is going to but we're talking about the first thing they would do is perhaps say, guys, bro, it's so, I'm not an economist. And the problem is like the way economy works is also based on supply and demand. And there's going to be competition. And people, I once read Ayn Rand's books, Atlas Shrugged and whatever the other one is. I loved them. And I like fully resonated with how she spoke. Like I came out of those books going like, yeah, like these people who like claim equality, but all they want is not have to do anything and get their share of the pie. Like I really admired that part. That's like people who have principles and they see a demand and they do what needs to be done to make it happen at great cost and personal risk. And ultimately it puts them in places of potentially high rank, high power, high wealth. I don't want to judge people for that. I think that that's brilliant and amazing.
So that sounds like the essential spirit of capitalism.
Well, I mean, this is the thing, like capitalism is not inherently evil, just as communism isn't inherently evil, but both of them become complete dog shows when they are put in the hands of humans who have no consciousness, humans who are not aware of when they are starting to operate out of like the lower end of Maslow's hierarchy or from their reactive elements, or when they're not doing shadow work, they're unaware of the unconscious things, they don't know how to repair trust, they don't know how to communicate well. I mean, communication, okay, so now I'm slowly getting to maybe more realistic things. I think one of the biggest problems on this planet, and it's visible in my own life and with everyone around me, is we are terrible at communicating. Like humans are just atrocious. Like the fights between husband and wives who married for years based on like, even me, like if I use chat to rewrite a message that I want to write, like, and it analyzes, it's like, I get what I wrote back going, oh my God, multiple times I'm subtly like judging the person. I'm hinting at their incompetency. I'm positioning myself morally above them. I'm like, oh my God, I'm one of the worst communicators.
Same here.
Then I realized, no, I'm one of the best. It's just that human standard of communication is outright atrocious. And I think I would probably start with that, because I think wars have been started because two people didn't even speak the same languages 100%. And they misunderstood each other's cultures and they think, oh, that guy's a threat. Meanwhile, the guy was doing what he thought was respectful. It's not always that simple, but like families have fought over less. Brothers have killed each other over less. So, for me, like NVC, nonviolent comms, Marshall Rosenberg, that kind of stuff is so like obvious. Things like Byron Katie's The Work, where you do the turnarounds, like ways to just say, hang on, before I like live by a particular thought, oh, the Germans are, power hungry. It's like, hang on, is that true? Is it really true? Like, what are the needs operating under here? What are my needs in this? Like, what actually could I ask for? Like, what if I turn that around? Am I actually power hungry? Am I the one feeling insecure? Am
I projecting?
So it's like, I don't think we're taught to interrogate a lot of our beliefs and again, the system currently is like, Christians are easy to control, and like Muslims are easy to whatever, I don't know. But like certainly there's an agenda, it seems, to like, we've got to make sure we're all Christian because it's that safety thing again. So I don't know, maybe I'd just ban religions if I was the but I can see how if I was made the king of the world or whatever you were talking about, the leader or the president or the, I can see how easy it would be to become a villain in everyone else's eyes. Because what I might think is a really good thing for the planet, everyone else is going to be like, this dude is sheer evil.
I mean, there are a lot of people out there who are struggling with this role at the moment, right?
You mean as providers or as leaders? Yeah, well, I mean, so I battle like Elon Musk, okay? I often judge the dude. For a while I was like super impressed. Like, wow, proud of this guy, South African, is incredible. The dude's just, I want to say a machine in a good way, but I was like, whoa, Then I started to find out more and I was just like, this guy is like the worst thing for humanity ever, Then I was like, okay, hang on. Now I'm just judging this dude so harsh. Like, what if this guy thinks he's doing what's best for the planet? Because I mean, how do you fix it? There's no magic pill. So you start somewhere. It's just like governments, bro. They got 4 years to try and make a change. So they start somewhere and then everyone says, but you're not doing this. Yeah. It's like, guys, I got 4 years. It'll take 400 years to like fix. Which is why the Chinese are pretty good at this stuff.
Opponents who fight every decision you make. It's a
You
shit
have to
show.
spend most of your time just making sure you get reelected. You can't
Yeah,
actually do
exactly.
anything that really makes a difference. And anything that makes a difference will mean neglecting something else, which will mean people, so our entire political system is a bit of a nightmare. But, benevolent dictatorships, as lovely as they are, how do you maintain that if you even manage to get to it? And how do you get everyone to agree to it? So I don't know if there is a silver bullet to the human condition. I think it's like, unless that little meteor that comes, but like, I think that it's ultimately, we're here, I think, to individuate and to discover our own consciousness and to find our truth, like that whole process of, we have a body and we've been blessed with life. And yes, planet Earth beautifully reflects the yin and the yang of the Tao. Like there is always going to be a polarity. There's always going to be a spectrum. There's always going to be the horrible shit that we don't want to look at. And it's just a reflection of ourselves. And if we as individuals can get to that point of loving, like even the darkest, most horrible stuff, like porn is always brought up as this like horrible. Bro, I don't use a lot of porn, but I actually, and luckily the porn I'm attracted to is like not anything too, like it doesn't look like anyone's being harmed, But it's like, I don't beat myself up, bro. If I choose to use porn, I will enjoy it. I hate to say it. And I find that I don't use it that much. And I'm not talking about the ethics behind the industry. I hate the thought that anyone's being exploited or controlled. But like, rather than talking about porn as some horrible, negative, evil, terrible thing that's afflicting the minds of everyone, yes, in some instances it is. But the shame that's underlying it and the shame that we're casting and the conditions we're ignoring, I think those are way more detrimental than porn. Porn's just a symptom. So I mean, it's a random example that's, it's not the kind of thing I want anyone to be quoting me about. It's not the kind of thing I want to talk about, but it's like, it's something I've noticed in myself as a progression and saying, okay, cool. If I feel terrible about the fact that I watch some porn, is that going to help the world? Especially if I keep doing it, go in these cycles. But if I'm like, hey, dude, that was enjoyable. I don't want to do this my whole life. I don't want to be spending my life watching porn. I've got way better things I want to do. But if that is what I want to do, I'm going to allow myself and see what happens. And what I've found is that I don't want to watch that much porn anymore because I actually love myself more. And I actually allow myself to start doing those other cool things that use my energy in a good way as a man. I have loads of energy. That energy that's getting stuck in that chakra wants to do other stuff, but our culture is not allowing us to be free and speak and sing. That's another thing, bro. Whiteys don't sing, bro. Xhosa people, black people, most of them, they sing, bro. And they'll sing anywhere and they'll dance anywhere. For us, it's like, oh, wow, you're going to go internet sensation because you danced in public. It's like, that's an example of how imprisoned we are in our egos and how scared we are of being judged. We're so terrified of our fragile self-image being cracked by dancing or singing. And why is it like that? Because when we're at school, you only sing if you're in the choir and someone approved of you. And you only sing if you win the Eisteddfod medal. And if you do sing, you will be judged quickly. And if you're not good at singing, you will be told that very quickly, And there's not a culture of collective singing we sang in church, but it was like, it was weird. I often think back about that. Like, why did singing in church never give me what I've received from living with sangomas and singing those songs or singing medicine songs from other cultures or just singing beautiful English medicine songs that are not denominational and not religious. They're just talking to the spirit of life that includes all and doesn't divide, So, yeah, bro, we're just here to do our work, sing songs, be healthy, try, be close to the earth, be kind to the people around us because that's ultimately where we're going to get the most. Like, I've never been in I want to say it. I said it to someone yesterday, but like, I've never been in better relations with my mother and my brother than I am at the moment, and with my ancestors. And I'm not in great relations with some other places in my life, but like with my mom and my brother, it's feeling good. And it's crazy how much it means to me. Like even now, like I didn't expect to get emotional about it, but for whatever reason, it like matters somehow. Like probably because they were there when I was like that small. And like one of the reasons I got into men's work is that I used to bully my brother, like verbally and emotionally. I would like call him things like a useless piece of shit, basically. And I was like a small boy. Why am I calling my younger brother that, bro? Why am I calling my younger brother that? It's like he looks up to me as my only brother. I'm his only older brother, So that shame that I've felt, and I've done a lot of work with it. My bro and I, we love each other a lot now, But that shame has been like, it was a huge reason why I don't want to conform to the society. Because I had everything that the society could possibly want to give us, like short of where you get totally spoiled. It's like everything that a human could want, I've received, like on this planet. And yet still, there I was saying those words to my brother. And that's what's been my journey. It's like, what made me need to say that? And what gave me that rage as a boy, And the only thing that my theory, besides that he took my mom's boobs from me, my only theory, or my main theory, because it's more like as we grew, was the absence of men, like supporting and nurturing and loving us. Now, I had my father, who was a lovely, beautiful, wonderful man. May he rest in peace. And he provided, and he was a wonderful man in many ways. But as I said, most of my life, he was in an office somewhere in a suit, And I know that wasn't his first choice. He wanted to be a game ranger, but he didn't want to be a game ranger because it wasn't going to be as accepted. So he chose to be a lawyer because that's what he needed to be. But a suit, bro, for 50 years, the amount of paperwork and like that kind of stuff, bro. So I feel for him deeply, but where I got it from, whether it was him, whether it was his stress, whether it was, the anxieties, whether it was his own stuff from previous generations, wherever it came from, or just our schools and the unloving, uncaring teachers and other boys that were there acting out their violence on other boys, even though we're all privileged. For me, it was not a loving initiation into what we call culture, And I've come to realize that it's only a small piece. Obviously, I don't judge it all, but that's why for me, it's like, I don't want to be that leader that you spoke about. I don't think it's possible. But like in this world, in this life, like for me, I want to be safe. And I still don't trust myself, bro. Because we compare, and I was comparing to Rob, and I think about him as a father. And I was thinking about, like, I don't trust myself to be a father or a husband. Because sometimes I still lose my shit, bro. And it's like, I do the qigong, I do the yoga, I do the meditation, I do the vipassanas, And it's like, flip, if I eat some sugar, bro, already I become more fractious, Try not eat sugar, it doesn't last, It's like sometimes the sugar just gets me. And then a few hours later, I'm like, fuck! About some random small little thing, So I'm like, the standards that I want for me to be a father, to be a husband, I haven't yet met. And I'm beginning to realize I may never meet them. So it's like, maybe I am good enough. Maybe this is good enough. Maybe just the effort to be better is enough. Maybe my sons or my children, my daughters will... Because one thing I do is I'll take accountability for it. I'll apologize quick. It doesn't last long. I can see it. I can own it. I can own it fully, And I think that's better than like, previous generations and some
100%.
men.
Dude, I just want to appreciate and recognize your vulnerability and your honesty. And I resonate with so much what you shared. I called my sister on Friday. It was her 19th birthday, and all my family still lives in Germany, and I'm the outlaw traveling around the world and settling on the other side of the globe. And I'm very intentional and happy with the decisions I made. I feel totally right down here. I always felt strange in the German society. I always felt like I wasn't belonging. And you've lived in Germany, so I guess you can kind of understand. And yet, when I called my sister, she was at my brother's place. I got two, one younger and one older brother, and my whole family was there. Except for my older brother, he was picking up one child, but there were my two nephews and my sister-in-law and my sister, my younger brother, and my mother was there. And I called Anna to say happy birthday. And after 10 minutes, we spoke for like 10, 15 minutes. And when we were about to say goodbye, and she said, I love you, I was sitting in Scarborough watching just another magnificent sunset, one of the most beautiful sunsets you can see on this planet Earth. I was like sitting in this magical place, and it just started crying my balls out because I even said it to her. I was like, I'm happy with my life. I'm really, really living the most authentic life I could live, and yet it's on days like these where it just hurts to be so far away from my family, from my tribe. So and also what you shared about bullying your brother, dude. That's one of my deepest scars. Like my brothers and me, we are so tight. We've grown up without our fathers, with a completely overwhelmed and yes, at times narcissistic mother. And it's crazy, dude. Like starting this podcast, I would say, and having these conversations with men like you, people like you in general, help me coming to peace with my background, and I got this narrative that I come from a very dysfunctional family, and yes, there was violence, and it was a lot of just a shit show. And yet, I realized that my parents did their best. They did exactly what they thought would be the best. And yeah, I think I just want to recognize you as a representation of the global man's work movement, as a representation of Mankind Project.
I have received from it, that's for sure.
We are doing the work. We are trying to fix what our previous generations could not fix for whatever reason. You know, may it just be unconsciousness. And I deeply feel with you, because I also feel that I'm in the final chapter, or in the transition of hopefully becoming a dad anytime soon in the future. I mean, that was like my main experience at the weekend with Mankind Project, because I realized because of the 2 abortions I had with the woman I love, that there's this belief ingrained in me now that I don't deserve to become a dad anymore. And you mentioned that taboo topic, abortion, in the beginning. And yeah, just dude, it's cutting out my words at the moment. But I see you, dude. I see you, and we both admire a guy like Robert Paddock. You know, he is a fucking legend and a huge inspiration for all men out there. He's a proper baller, you know. And yet, I think the 2 of us and every man out there, we've got to be careful with, you know, comparing us to people like him. And there's always, you know, the saying, the grass is always greener on the other side.
I still want my life, and I still want to be me, bro.
Exactly.
You know, like,
and you know, we do our work. We are unique in our own way, and I don't want this to turn into a wannabe Tony Robbins coaching.
I love Tony
session.
Robbins.
Yeah. he's also a fucking legend. He's a huge inspiration. But
it's gone a bit strange lately, but yes, he's been a huge influence, a huge mentor.
He's getting older. Yeah. But dude, yeah, can we just say that we are good enough the way we are, and send this message out to all men out there who, just like we do, just like we've been doing it, do all this man's work, inner work, you know, and we keep striving to become better, to fix and improve and whatnot, you know, and that's all admirable, that's all honorable, and that's what we need to build a new generation of man. But at the same time, dude, can we just give ourselves what we were not given when we needed it, which is saying, I'm good enough. Yeah, I'm worthy. You are worthy, dude. You are good enough. And I, totally honest, dude, I see a great father in you.
Thank you.
Period.
You know, this good enough term, I think we just need to not use it anymore, because it implies that you got to be good at something, and that there's an enoughness to it. For me, like, all the ways that I'm not good enough, which there are a few, like, it's not, I don't want to swear, bro. You know, I don't want to swear at people I love. I don't want to, you know, inflict violent energy in my words towards people. It's not good enough for me. You know, the thing is that those judgments that I've had of myself have also inspired me to improve and to be better. You know, like I've done the Sangoma trainings and the Vipassanas and the yoga classes, and I eat better, and I care about a lot of things, and I make huge efforts because, yes, I want to be better. So I've been brought many blessings out of those, and I've been aware of that wound for a long time. So I have the awareness of it. But I think the piece that maybe it might be semantics, but it's the worthiness piece. It's like, it doesn't matter if I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not good enough, but I'm still worthy. And I'm still worthy of love. I'm still worthy of choosing what I want to do in the world and making my best effort, you know, not allowing myself to not do things because of other people's opinions. And I'm not talking about doing things that harm others. Obviously, like, it's about respect for others, but it's about saying, you know what, I'm worthy to pursue the dreams that I wish. I'm worthy to play the role, or at least try. I might not be good enough to be the president. I don't think I am, you know, but like, I'm worthy of trying for it. I'm worthy of going to study to be one. I'm worthy of being the president of the local ping pong society, if that's what I end up becoming. Like, and I can play a role where I do, and I will find, you know, like, this is the thing I said earlier, I don't trust myself. I don't trust myself in some regards, still. and I'm disappointed about that, and it'll drive me to keep improving. But I do have faith, and I was gonna Google like, what's the difference between trust and faith? Because faith, when I was raised, was like God is whatever. For me, faith, I think, is more like I believe that whatever happens in my life, whatever I go through, whatever choices I make, whatever I do end up getting or not getting, it's what I'm meant to get, and it's what's ultimately for my growth and my awakening. And that's exactly what I need, actually. So all of these so-called wounds, challenges, even this fucked up planet, with all this crazy dynamic, it's like the perfect place to come and like rekindle men's work in the universe. It's like there's opportunities. And I think, I'm trying to remember, there's like a Chinese character, and I wish I could remember what it is, but it's something like, what it meant was crisis and opportunity. That's what the word was made of. And those two characters together created this word, which in English we judge as bad. It was like disaster, I think. So it's like we see something as disaster as negative. But then in this character, and I probably got this wrong because this is like whenever I learned this 20 years ago. But it was and I think I even read once that this wasn't true. But the message was cool, which was crisis and opportunity go together, and there's always an opportunity. Like in any wound that we have, in any circumstance that we're in, there's an opportunity to overcome, to grow, to learn something, So for me, no one's a victim, bro. No one is a victim. And like trying to help people to like not be victims is rescuing. And we all know that the rescuer, victim, perpetrator dynamic is a triangle that creates drama, and you just end up switching roles the whole time, sometimes playing all the roles at once. So I think for me, it's about just feeling like I'm worthy. And also, crucially, it's not I'm worthy. We are worthy, bro. It's not I, it's we. We are worthy. And other people are also worthy of their opinion. They're also worthy of their perspective. They're also worthy of wanting to protect their family. And they're worthy of doing it the way they think is best. They may have to learn horrible lessons that actually, if you do bomb those people will bomb you. It might feel good today and next week you're living in paranoia, But they actually are all equally, we are all equally worthy. And that's a difficult thing to swallow, And I think the game of life's not meant to be easy and obvious. So we're all going to be navigating like sailors on the seas for the rest of our lives, and there's currents and there's tides and there's winds and there's boats disintegrating and, our health changing. It's the journey, man. That's what's so epic.
The journey of being human.
Yeah, dude. So.
Mic drop. Dude, to close this with one of my favorite questions, because this is called the Man Search for Meaning podcast.
Oh, good. You've changed it.
Based
nice.
on the book by Viktor Frankl, right? Fantastic book.
It's a good name, by the way. I think it's a great name.
I just need to figure out the copyright things. And
why? You could call it one man's new quest for meaning. You could make a small play on it. No one can copyright you're not going to write a book called that, are you?
No, probably not, no.
Is there someone
Man's
else?
Search for Meaning Part 2.
Yeah, man's ongoing search for meaning. Whatever, you'll find a piece. Yeah, but it's a good one.
Wait, the last question I like to ask is, what makes life meaningful?
For me? I was listening to you ask Rob that question, and he's like relationships, and it speaks to Ubuntu, and it speaks to old Alexander Supertramp, and all these characters. So, it's hard for me to not want to also say like my relationships, but there is something around the relationship to growing and to relating, to even just what is consciousness, you might want to call it. It's like I'm not going to have all the same people in my life my whole life, and so it's not only about people. It's about how I relate to me, actually, how I relate to myself and to the way I experience life. So there's something there about growth. My kind of intention for this life for a long time has been joyful service. So it's like I want to be in service, but I also want to lead a joyful life. I don't want to be like a bitter, grumpy old person who like does a lot of good.
Fuck happiness.
No. Although people don't know what they're talking about when they talk about happiness sometimes, so it's kind of like, at the same time, yes, fuck happiness in a particular way. Yeah. But brother, it is friendship as well, definitely. It's companionship and movement and health and this beautiful planet. It's like so epic. So I just feel so blessed to be here, and I just wish that we could all become custodians of this planet, and of each other. yeah, but it's a school, bro. That's it. It's a
School of
school.
life.
It's a school of life, and that gives me a sense of like, oh yeah, I'm here to learn. Part of that's going to be around relationships. Part of it's going to be around service. Part of it's going to be around pleasure and pain and whatever. But it's a school.
Mic drop. Craig Makhosi, that was deeply, deeply enriching. Very controversial at times.
Oh God,
but
was
I
it?
appreciate your
I was just joking.
No, dude, I think it will reach the right people.
Depends how you edit it.
Well, I'll just show the
It depends how AI
the most polarizing statements. No, dude, I'm gonna watch and listen to this, I'm sure, a second and a third time, because there's so much we touched on, and
there's
a lot of
lots more to
things to contemplate about. So I appreciate your honesty, your transparency. You really embodied a quote by Sam Harris I heard yesterday, which is, if you have economic security and people who love you unconditionally, you have an obligation to speak your truth. And you really did that. And that's the thing I admire and appreciate the most. So thank you, brother.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you for creating space and for holding it and for following your vision and sharing these little pearls that you are finding on your path. And it's great to see you doing it. So I admire you and respect you for that. Keep going, and may it continue to bring you joy and spread joy in the world.
Amen.
Blessings.
Amen.